Spring eventually gives way to summer and flourishes after its initial bloom. It brings with it new opportunities to charge ahead, answers to our questions, and new friends along the way. And yet, under the summer heat, not all opportunities bring good fortune, not all answers bring comfort, and new foes are just as likely to arise before the leaves begin to fall. Before moving into the month of June, there's one small detail that starts to nag at the back of our minds that not all is right at GeckoCon. After the exam week, when Miss Toriumi is going over the material covered, she mentions an essay question about bullying. It's only really brought up as a hypothetical, as she brushes off the notion that there's any sort of that behavior happening at the school. Reality, however, isn't often so kind. Walking through the hallway to the sports clubs, Yukari overhears a few girls chatting away. Apparently, one of the girls pretended to take a picture of some other poor girl and found amusement when her victim started crying and pleading with her to stop. The two of them start laughing as Yukari feels pity for the girl's victim, but as she goes to walk away, one of the girls says something about hearing voices. Neither Yukari nor the other girl can hear the voice, and after a few moments the girl shakes it off and the two continue on with their conversation. It's only a few days later that rumors start to swirl around the school, and one night when the dorm gathers together in the lobby, Junpei brings it up to everyone else. Supposedly, a girl was found laying unconscious by the front gate of the school, and the rumors going around say that she was the victim of an angry spirit. It freaks Yukari out a bit hearing about a ghost attack, and when Mitsuru and Akihiko ask him to carry on, Junpei tells the full story. If the stories are to be believed, there's a ghost that wanders the halls of the school late at night, and should it catch anyone there, it will devour their souls. According to one of Junpei's friends, he saw the victim go into the school on the night of the attack, and the reason she was found laying unconscious was because the ghost managed to find her. It's a strange story, but one that merits some looking into, and so to prove that the story is fictional, Yukari suggests gathering some information. Mitsuru and Akihiko entrust the others to look into the matter, with them agreeing to reconvene at the end of the week. As Makoto heads to bed that night, he receives another visit from the strange boy, arriving with yet another warning. In 1 week's time, he will face another ordeal, and once it's all over, the boy promises to visit him once again. After school each day, we're able to run around and talk to some of the random students wandering the halls, as well as the people at the various other locations we can visit. Normally, they would give us a bit of an insight into what is happening around Iwatodai and Tatsumi Port Island, adding a bit more color to the setting. Over the next week, however, we can also hear a variety of rumors going around, and so Makoto does the best detective work that he's able to until Friday evening rolls around. When the three meet up again, it becomes clear Junpei didn't take the investigation seriously, and so instead Yukari and Makoto compare their findings. As it turns out, there is more to the story than first thought, and it's unlikely a ghost was involved in any way. True to the ghost story, a girl was found unconscious outside of the school, but she wasn't the only one. The reason the story spread so quickly was because there were actually 2 more victims over the following days. Each of them was found in front of the school and had to be hospitalized, but other than that, there didn't seem to be any sort of connection between the victims. They were, however, friends of one another and had apparently fallen into a bit of a bad crowd. In order to get further answers, Yukari suggests doing a bit of field research by visiting the location where they would frequently hang out. That location, however, happens to be the alleyway behind Port Island Station, which Junpei immediately tries to shut down. It's known as a place where thugs tend to hang out, but Yukari is insistent that they go, as up until this point, all they've done is take orders on what to do. This time, she wants to take the initiative, roping in both Makoto and Junpei to go with her the following night. Junpei's apprehension doesn't diminish, however, and when the three arrive at the station, they stick out in their school uniforms. They almost immediately attract the attention of 2 punks that approach, while 2 girls off to the side cheer them on. They tell the 3 of them to run off as they don't belong here, but Yukari would stubbornly refuse to turn around, going so far as to tell Junpei not to be intimidated by these scum. The careless comment starts to agitate them, and when Yukari provokes them further, the punks take a step forward and punch Junpei in the stomach. Before they can start to lay into Makoto, however, a voice calls out for them to stop. Akihiko's friend from the hospital steps out of the shadows, telling the punks to back off, as the three of them didn't know what they were getting themselves into. Unimpressed, one punk tries to charge at the boy, only to get knocked back with a headbutt. The punks reveal the older kid's name to be Shinjiro Aragaki, posturing up to him. Their threats fail to work, however, and getting ready for a brawl, Shinjiro intimidates the others to run away. Relieved to be out of the situation, Junpei thanks Shinji for helping them out, only to get told to run back home. Before he can leave, however, Yukari informs him that they had actually come for information, which Shinji correctly guesses is about the ghost story. As it turns out, the girls who ended up in the hospital came around each night to boast about this girl that they had been tormenting, named Fuka Yamagishi. It's for that reason that the rumors are saying that the angry ghost haunting the school is actually Fuka's spirit, as she hasn't been seen in over a week. Not just around school, but she also hasn't been home in that time either, quelling any suspicions she was just out sick. Yukari thanks Shinji for the information, only for him to walk away and tell them not to come here again. If there are more answers, they would likely lie with Fuka's homeroom teacher, Mr. Ikoda, and when the three head to the faculty office the following Monday, they find they aren't the only ones to seek him out. Mitsuru is already there asking about Fuka, while one of her bullies sits shaking nearby. At the mention of Fuka's name, the other student, Natsuki Moriyama, starts having a panic attack, claiming she never wanted things to turn out like they did. As Mitsuru tries to get further answers, she's stopped by Mr. Ikoda, telling Natsuki that she doesn't have to answer any questions so as to not give the wrong idea. Despite that, however, Natsuki claims that they were just messing around with Fuka, and spills everything that happened that night. On May 29th, Natsuki and her friends had locked Fuka in the gym from the outside as a sort of joke, intending to leave her there. One of the others, however, ended up going back to unlock the door as she was worried that they'd get in trouble if Fuka ended her own life. She never returned, and the next morning she was found outside of the school as the first victim. Natsuki herself tried to let Fuka out the next day, but when she entered the gym, Fuka was nowhere to be found. After that, the girls went out each night to try and find her, and one by one they were each picked off. That was nearly 2 weeks ago, and now Natsuki is the only one left. During that time, Mr. Ikoda had simply dismissed Fuka's absences as illness, with neither him nor her parents alerting the authorities about her disappearance. When asked to explain himself, Mr. Ikoda gives the excuse that he was trying not to ruin the future of everyone involved. Mitsuru, however, calls him out on his obvious attempt to cover the whole thing up for the sake of his own career, before turning back to Natsuki and asking for any other details she may remember. Supposedly, each of the other girls had heard a strange voice calling out to them right before they went missing. With their suspicions likely confirmed, Mitsuru tells Makoto, Junpei, and Yukari that they will need to discuss the current situation after school. Up until now, it seemed to be random why certain people would wake up during the dark hour, but now it's become clear that the shadows are specifically targeting and waking humans for them to devour. To Natsuki, she tells her to stay at the dorm tonight, and that Fuka will be safe by morning. Meeting in the student council room once classes are over, Mitsuru announces that night, C's would infiltrate the campus and rescue Fuka, drawing a bit of confusion from everyone else. Fuka hasn't been seen anywhere in the last week and a half, and she wasn't seen leaving the school, which means if Mitsuru's hunch is correct, then Fuka is somewhere inside of Tartarus. While it's true that Fuka has been missing for 10 days, that doesn't necessarily mean she's dead quite yet. As Akihiko points out, Tartarus only appears during the dark hour, but it's gone the rest of the day. It's possible that time works differently within the tower, and from Fuka's perspective, it's only been 10 hours instead of 10 days. Other doubts creep in, however, from Junpei and Yukari. Both of them point out that the dark hour is pretty brutal on the body, and they can only last an hour before getting wiped out, let alone Fuka surviving for 10. Not only that, but there is no guarantee they'd even be able to find her, as she could be anywhere within the gargantuan structure. Still, Akihiko refuses to simply give up on her, and if he needs to go in alone, then so be it. As for getting to her, Akihiko does have an idea. It's possible that if they enter Tartarus the same way Fuka did, they may end up somewhere near her. It could possibly mean they wind up in Tartarus on some random floor without a way to get back down, but as it stands, it's their best option. Meeting back up at the dorm, their plan has already encountered a problem as Mitsuru has been unable to make contact with Akutsuki. Without him, they will be unable to use his keys in order to enter the school once it's closed. That is, until Junpei steps in stating that he already has their entrance plan handled. Mitsuru, assuming Junpei has some kind of explosive, leaves it to him, when in reality, Junpei had simply left a door unlocked before he left for the day. With a viable way into the school without breaking in, the C's members infiltrate the building and quickly make their way to one of the classrooms to plan their next moves. The gymnasium is still locked, which means they will need to find the key to get in, to which Mitsuru splits the group apart. Her and Akihiko will check the janitor's closet, while Makoto, Yukari, and Junpei will search the faculty lounge. When Junpei mentions swiping a few test answers, however, he's dragged along by Mitsuru towards the closet. Splitting off, Makoto and Yukari make their way downstairs only to hear footsteps wandering around. They hide quickly as a flashlight sweeps over the area as a security guard wanders the halls. Once the guard has passed, the two of them quickly make their way towards the faculty office, searching around in the dark for the keys. Despite the low visibility, they manage to find the right set, meeting back up with the others in the main hallway. Once the two parties have regrouped with their entrance to the gym secured, they can begin planning their operation. Mitsuru initially assigns Makoto, Akihiko, and Yukari to enter the tower, while Junpei stays with her in case anything goes wrong, but Junpei speaks up, wanting a chance to redeem himself for his actions the month prior. With him joining the team heading into Tartarus, Yukari is chosen to remain behind with Mitsuru, and with the two teams sorted out, the three head towards the gym to wait for midnight to strike. Back in the supposed safety of the dorm, Natsuki awakes during the dark hour. Quickly, she's tormented by a voice calling out to her, convincing her to come tell Fuka she's sorry for all that happened. Within Tartarus, while waiting to make contact with the others, Yukari brings up Natsuki to Mitsuru, hoping she's alright. Unfortunately, no place is truly safe during the dark hour, but they didn't have much choice but to leave her at the dorm unattended. As Mitsuru turns back towards her equipment, helping to amplify the range of her persona's support capabilities, she finally hears back from Akihiko. He's much higher up than anyone expected, and communication is choppy at best. Mitsuru and Yukari make out that he has been separated from Junpei and Makoto before the connection cuts off, leaving them with only the silence of the tower. Cut off from Akihiko and Junpei, Makoto would wake up somewhere within Tartarus, hearing a familiar voice. The young boy would appear again for the first time outside of the dorm, and this time his warning is a bit more dire. Tonight, Makoto will face not one but two ordeals, but not all hope is lost. He encourages Makoto to start searching around for Fuka, as they will all be needing her help in the nights to come. As Makoto starts to search around, avoiding the shadows that prowl the floor, communication with Mitsuru would cut in and out. During a few brief moments, he does manage to catch what she's saying, as Mitsuru informs him that she's located his position and that both Akihiko and Junpei are just a few floors above him. Mitsuru isn't the only voice Makoto hears, however, and as he climbs higher up the tower, he would hear another call out to him. This one is much more frightened and questioning, however, asking Makoto if he's really human and if they have come to rescue it. It's not long before Makoto finds the other two, and now that they've regrouped, Akihiko decides they probably shouldn't enter Tartarus this way again. Junpei asks if the others heard a voice in their head as they were exploring, only for that same voice to call out behind a corner. Miraculously, Fuka is still alive, and now that she's safely in their care, the C's members prepare to look for a way back down. As Akihiko attempts to make contact with Mitsuru to no success, Makoto and Junpei check on Fuka as she questions where exactly they are right now. Somehow, Fuka seems to be unharmed, and when Junpei asks if she ran into any monsters, she seems rather surprised that her instincts were right. She could almost sense other beings within the tower, managing to avoid them for the past 10 hours. Hearing this, Akihiko comes to the conclusion that Fuka actually has an ability similar to Mitsuru, but that Fuka's may actually be more powerful. He hands over an evoker, telling her that it's a sort of good luck charm in case they run into any trouble, before leading the group through the halls in search of an exit. As they pass by one of the many windows that look out across the city, Junpei stops and takes notice of the full moon. Akihiko mentions that, according to some research, shadows are affected by the phases of the moon in the same way that humans are, but that thought leads Junpei to another. It was a full moon the same night the shadow took control of the monorail, and Makoto confirms that it was also a full moon the night the dorm was attacked. If the pattern holds, then that would mean that another powerful shadow would be prowling around tonight, and as Akihiko finally makes contact with Mitsuru, she tries to warn him about something before cutting out. Whatever Mitsuru was trying to warn them about, Fuka can sense it down below, and confirms that it is much larger than the other shadows she's sensed thus far. Not only that, but it seems to be attacking someone, which only confirms Akihiko's suspicions. The full moon draws out these powerful shadows, and with little time to waste, the party redoubles their efforts to find a way down. Locating a teleporter, they would return to the ground floor where Mitsuru's equipment lies smashed to pieces, and both Yukari and Mitsuru are being attacked by two monstrous shadows. Yukari warns the others that the shadows seem to deflect any attacks thrown at them and that fighting them has proven useless. The shadows would turn their attention to the entrance, however, as footsteps herald the arrival of another visitor. In a dream-like trance, Natsuki would wander into Tartarus, collapsing in front of the two. Despite the danger, Fuka would rush forward, urging Natsuki to escape, only for one of the two shadows to approach them. As Fuka pulled out the evoker, Akihiko would warn her that it's not actually a weapon, and yet Fuka can already sense what its true purpose is. Fuka's persona encased both her and Natsuki within it, protecting them, and as Akihiko checks on Mitsuru, she repeats Yukari's warning. With all of their equipment destroyed, Mitsuru is unable to provide any support, but from within the protective shell, Fuka announces that she can see the shadow's weaknesses. Telling Mitsuru and Yukari to stay back and rest, Akihiko, Junpei, and Makoto would rush forward to challenge the two monstrous shadows. These two are aligned to the arcana of the Empress and the Emperor, and just like the Priestess, they are meant to be inversions of their meaning. The Empress and Emperor are symbols of feminine and masculine authority, with the Empress being a motherly figure that nurtures and cares for those below her, while the Emperor is a fatherly figure that represents strength, security, and the will to lead. Here, however, the Empress embodies the qualities of selfishness and hedonism, with its more rounded and opulent design calling to the mind the idea of a queen that lives a life of luxury while taking from those beneath her. The belt around its stomach seems to be all that is keeping it in a more dignified shape, with the rest of its body bulging out around it, almost as though the shadow is growing large off of the minds it's devouring. It makes the other details stand out just a bit more, with the cape wrapped around its arms, the jeweled necklaces wrapped around its neck, and the decorative collar in behind it. These all contribute to the idea that the Empress prefers to dress itself up in beautiful jewelry and dresses, hoarding it all for itself, and even its partner is not spared from its greed. By contrast, the Emperor is much less colorful, dressed in black clothing with simple tassels at the shoulders and a short cape. Really, the only splashes of color on this creature is a large red cross across its chest, and the purple mask that gives the silhouette of a crown. The body is just as lopsided as the Empress, but where the Empress's design leaned heavier on the bottom half, the Emperor's is bulkier on the top. The larger upper body makes it feel as though it's puffing up its chest somewhat, trying to look more intimidating than it actually is. Its movements are a lot more stiff and wooden, and for an arcana that's all about leadership, the Emperor's shadow feels almost like it's a doll being pulled along and made to move. The body of the Empress almost resembles a bowling pin with the long and slender neck combined with the round body, and with the thin and stiff legs of the Emperor, the two seem as if they would be easily knocked over. It's this design choice that makes it a lot more apparent what sort of strategy the player should employ in order to overcome them. The Emperor and Empress are the only full moon bosses of the game that have a proper weakness, and as such, the player can exploit them in order to score successive all-out attacks. This ties into the primary gimmick of the fight, as the two will periodically perform a paradigm shift, randomly changing their weaknesses and immunities. This reduces the fight to a sort of trial-and-error challenge to guess at what is actually effective, were it not for two limiting factors that result in this being the easiest of the full moon shadows. The first factor is that the two shadows always begin the fight in a preset state. The Empress will start with a weakness against physical attacks, and the Emperor will start with a weakness for magic. And so, if the player is fast enough, they can kill one or both before they have the chance to use a paradigm shift. The other factor that trivializes this fight is Fuka herself, as, in actuality, this fight is more of a tutorial on how to utilize her abilities. During combat, Fuka is capable of scanning enemies and identifying their weaknesses, resistances, and immunities. The limitation is that Fuka can only scan one enemy at a time, and the scan does not finish until after the enemy has taken its turn, but it completely removes the guesswork required to take out the duo. It's a very useful skill to take advantage of, as the AI of the other party members respond accordingly once an enemy has been scanned, prioritizing attacks that are more effective against them. All in all, the Empress and Emperor are a neat idea for a boss to show off a vital aspect of the game that I wish had more health or random starting weaknesses to have a little more time to make use of its gimmick. Thankfully, once the two fall relatively easily and as the dust settles, everyone is able to breathe a sigh of relief. After checking to make sure Natsuki is alright, Fuka would finally give in to her exhaustion and collapse onto the floor. As Natsuki sobbed over Fuka's unconscious body, Yukari would question what to do with her, since now Natsuki knows about the shadows and the dark hour. According to Akihiko, however, that isn't really the case. Since Natsuki doesn't have the potential, she won't remember any of this happening. This means that she will also forget about Fuka saving her life, although Mitsuru has a feeling that things will work out for the best. Even if Natsuki forgets, it's likely an unconscious part of her will remember learning her lesson, and hopefully will stop tormenting Fuka. The party would take Fuka to the hospital to recover, the extended time within Tartarus having wiped out her strength for the moment, but Akihiko and Mitsuru would visit her over the course of the next few evenings. Thankfully, she would recover from the entire ordeal, and only days later she would be brought to the dorm to receive a proper explanation for everything that happened to her. Gathering the meeting together, Ikutsuki welcomes Fuka to sit with the rest of the group, commending everyone on a job well done. Not only did they manage to rescue Fuka, but the three girls that had fallen victim to the shadows have all recovered and left the hospital. Each of them had heard the call of the two shadows and would head to the school around midnight. However, due to an existing ghost story, rumors started to obscure the truth, and the attacks and the story blended together. Fuka apologizes for making so many people worry about her, to which Mitsuru reassures her that without her, it's likely they all would have died against the two powerful shadows. Mitsuru asks Fuka to join the team, lending them her special abilities, to which Yukari tries to remind Fuka that it's her choice and that she doesn't need to rush into an answer. If it's to help other people though, Fuka is more than willing, accepting Mitsuru's offer. It would mean having to move into the dorm, which Fuka admits she's more than fine with, as her life with her parents isn't exactly the greatest. Yukari again brings up that maybe things are moving a little fast, but her concerns are brushed off, as Ikutsuki brings up the powerful shadows, and the apparent connection they hold to the full moon. It's a definitive advantage knowing when they'll be showing up, and as such, it gives the team deadlines to prepare for their next fight. Around the school the next day, people have already begun to gossip about all that had happened, including how Mr. Akoda has earned a bit of trouble for his cover-up. When Fuka returns to class, however, the other students label her as the ghost girl from the story, leaving her more isolated than she was before. That is, until Natsuki enters the classroom behind her. Rather than picking on her, Natsuki actually tries to start up a conversation. When she notices Fuka seems to be depressed, Natsuki offers to lend an ear should she need anyone to talk to. It's an offer that Fuka accepts, even agreeing to try to be friends with Natsuki. Fuka's not the only one that makes a friend over the week, however, as Makoto is visited once again by the strange, ghostly boy. Now that he's spent a bit of time with the boy, heeding his warnings, the boy asks if he can be Makoto's friend. When asked for his name, however, the boy takes a moment to consider the answer. He introduces himself as Pharos, and only now do we start his automatic social link. Unlike C's, however, which was tied to the Fool Arcana, Pharos is aligned to death. It's a rather frightful arcana on the surface due to the concept of death in general, and yet it is actually one of renewal and rebirth. The arcana of death signifies the closing of one door to open another, and of leaving the past behind. It's this idea of looking towards the future we'll be keeping in mind for our next conversations with Pharos, as he bids Makoto farewell and leaves him to his slumber. From here, life carries on, and while the party returns to their regular classes, new paths open up within Tartarus. For the remainder of the game, Fuka will serve as the party's navigator, replacing Mitsuru as the one communicating with the party from down below. While this means they can explore higher without any sort of interference due to the distance, it also means Mitsuru herself can return to the battlefield. Seeing as there are now 5 potential party members and only 3 positions besides Makoto to fill, we'll actually have the option on how we want to structure our party. In my case, however, I'll be sticking with Yukari, Junpei, and Mitsuru through the rest of the game, barring a few story moments where someone is unavailable. The barrier that was preventing us from continuing onwards can now also be cleared, but rather than opening into a new area, we are simply given the second half of Arca. Most of Tartarus will be divided up this way, with each block having a lower and upper block that will take 2 months in order to clear. The only exceptions to this are the bottom and topmost blocks, and as such it means that we will be able to skip over unlocking the upper halves, only focusing on when new ones can be explored. Like the previous 2 months, the party will slowly climb their way up until they reach another barrier, and as they do, Ikutsuki will continue his research into the nature of the shadows. Only once he's made some progress will he contact Mitsuru to gather everyone at the dorm one evening in order to share his findings with the team. Upon returning to the dorm to meet with Ikutsuki, Makoto will find Yukari and Fuka out by the front steps, playing with a dog. The dog's name is Koromaru and was apparently just walking down the street by himself when he ran into the 2 girls. As a woman walks by with her own dog, she's surprised to see that these walks are still something Koromaru does, even after the incident. She explains that Koromaru once belonged to the priest at Naganaki Shrine, and that the 2 of them would go for a walk along the same route every afternoon. 6 months ago, however, the priest was hit by a car and passed away, and ever since then, Koromaru has been walking the same route every day, then sitting and waiting by the site of the accident. As the woman runs off, the 3 turn back towards Koromaru, when Fuka senses something unusual. Whatever it was, she brushes it off as Koromaru continues his walk, and they head inside to prepare to meet with Ikutsuki that evening. By the time Ikutsuki arrives, everyone is already gathered in the control room, allowing him to get straight to business. His research has actually found a correlation between the shadows encountered during the full moon and the ones found within Tartarus, as while they don't know anything about the larger shadows, they do know a few key points about the smaller ones. Generally, the shadows can be classified into 12 different categories, identified as the first 12 cards of the major arcana. These categories are defined by their characteristics and abilities, and while the larger shadows may seem different from the regular ones, they actually fit quite well into these distinctive categories. The last 2 shadows aligned with the Empress and Emperor, the one on the train aligned to the Priestess, and it's more than likely the one that attacked the dorm aligned to the Magician. If that pattern holds true, that means that they have already encountered 4 of the 12 types of shadows, and necessarily means that there are only 8 more remaining. There are still many unanswered questions, such as what the shadows are or what their purpose is, but it is reassuring to have a definitive idea on how many of these powerful shadows they'll have to face. Unfortunately, each has been stronger than the last, and as each new shadow appears, the team will need to grow even stronger to match them. One question that lies unanswered is Tartarus itself, and as Yukari asks where it may have come from, she catches Mitsuru averting her gaze, before the meeting comes to a close. Even as C's continue their investigations on how to end the Dark Hour, they wouldn't be the only ones active at night. Online, rumors would surface about a site one can use to order revenge assassinations against other people, and it would be under the cover of the Dark Hour that these killings would take place. Once the clock struck midnight, this group, under the name of Strega, would pull their victims out of their coffins and execute them. Even if the target managed to escape from the 3 assassins, they would be left vulnerable against the shadows and perish regardless. They claim no sense of morality, and as they are able to operate without witnesses, the slayings appear as just a random crime rather than something targeted. The rumors of this spread to the students at the school and get picked up by Makoto, but like so many others, they would be dismissed as simply ghost stories. Still, others would reject the dark hour altogether. Towards the end of the month, Akihiko would approach Shinjiro out while at dinner, ordering a meal of his own while they chat. Akihiko brings up how SEAS has recruited a number of new members to fight back against the Shadows, and once again extends the offer for Shinji to return to the team. It's an offer that is swiftly rejected, and when Akihiko tells his friend that he should stop dwelling on the past, Shinjiro calls him a hypocrite and walks out on the conversation. They would not be the only ones holding on to secrets, and while Yukari was initially hesitant about Fuka joining the team, her reservations lay with how hard Mitsuru seemed to push the new member into her role. Other doubts have been slowly creeping into her mind as well, including Mitsuru's reactions whenever Tartarus is brought up, and so she calls Fuka into the control room one evening to ask her a favor. During Yukari's own research into the incident that happened 10 years ago, a number of students were strangely absent. The evidence suggests that the Shadows were somehow involved, and it's become increasingly apparent that Mitsuru is hiding something from the rest of the party, and in all likelihood it relates back to that incident. Given she has experience with computers, Yukari asks Fuka if she could help try and dig anything up about the incident, if only to quell her own growing anxieties. Although she makes no promises that she'll be able to find anything, Fuka does agree to look into the matter, and the two decide to keep their investigation a secret for the time being. If we take a step back for a moment and look back towards the end of April, there's one interaction I had skipped over, but we'll be returning to now. On April 27th, Mitsuru will approach us and ask us to join the student council in order to have someone to help shoulder the load. She explains that she doesn't actually expect us to attend every meeting, but we can just come when we have the time available. But as the student council president, Mitsuru would appreciate having someone she knows is in her corner. All of the paperwork has already been filed, and all we need to do is visit Miss Toriumi in the faculty lounge to accept. It's in the student council that we can meet two more social links, starting with the Emperor Arcana, which is a fitting arcana for one in a position of power. The Emperor is a symbol of authority and power, being a patriarchal and masculine force of discipline. While the Emperor is tasked with upholding law and order, these qualities can be pushed too far when the Arcana is reversed, becoming strict and unyielding to those that do not conform to the established order, and may even become a tyrant if not careful. Once we inform Miss Toriumi of our intention to join the student council, Mitsuru will be the one to bring us in and introduce us to the other council members. Two of these members are Hidetoshi Odagiri, the head of the disciplinary committee, and Chihiro Fushimi, the council's treasurer. Our time in the student council from then on is helping others to fulfill their duties, and it doesn't take long for Hidetoshi to come and pick our brain about some of the rumblings going on around the school. Supposedly, some students have started a petition to abolish the school uniform, which Hidetoshi dismisses outright. It's not so much the idea of getting rid of the uniforms themselves, but in loosening the rules and granting more freedom. With more freedom and less rules, however, the systems of power will inevitably begin to buckle, until the entire thing collapses. Or at least that is how Hidetoshi explains it to us before sending us home for the day. When we return later, we can find Hidetoshi talking with one of the teachers, bringing him in on an investigation. Apparently, a cigarette butt was found in one of the boys' washrooms, leaving it to Hidetoshi to find the culprit. As refusing would only bring suspicion towards us, we agree to help Hidetoshi, earning just a bit of his trust. The next time we help him out, Hidetoshi seems to be absent, and when Mitsuru asks where he is today, she's informed about his investigation and how his zeal has only been causing further issues with the other members. On our way out, we run into him, confronting another student. Despite no evidence, Hidetoshi has been accusing other students based solely on their reputation. When the student he's accusing professes his innocence, he even attempts to leverage his position as the head of the disciplinary committee to extort the names of any other suspicious individuals. While he did not have a positive reputation to begin with, Hidetoshi's recent actions have only worsened perceptions of him among the rest of the school. Even knowing that, Hidetoshi decides to stick to his convictions. The situation only escalates the next time we check in on the student council, with Hidetoshi not only accusing other council members but the female students as well. In the end, the other members leave the room, leaving us alone with Hidetoshi. He acknowledges that his attitude does push people away, but it's not for the sake of isolating himself. Rather, it's to spare himself and everyone else from suffering from the pain when the relationship inevitably breaks. The following meeting ends very briefly, to the point where the other council members have already left by the time we arrive. Only Hidetoshi is left in the room, having stayed behind to work the cigarette problem over further in his mind. Since we're sticking around as well, he asks us if he can use us as a bit of a sounding board before speaking his thoughts aloud. He ponders what a man who has nothing clings to as he goes through life. It's a question that at one point someone asked him and offered the answer that one clings to sincerity. Hidetoshi scoffs at the answer due to an injury that happened to an anchorwoman gathering information for a story. The executives of the station labeled the incident as an unfortunate accident, and when other media outlets caught wind that something was being covered up, the station turned one of the scriptwriters into a scapegoat. Society is built on the principle that the weak are preyed upon by the strong. Hidetoshi, however, dreams of building a company where everyone is treated fairly, and only needs to seize the power to make it a reality. His words give us a bit of a better understanding of his reasoning for pursuing the investigation, as well as keeping others at an arm's length. However, the next time we see him, Hidetoshi seems to be a bit less sure of himself. As it turns out, the teachers had been talking about expelling the student that was smoking in the boys' washroom, and it appears to weigh heavily on Hidetoshi's mind. Once the others leave the student council for the day, Hidetoshi comes to us to see what we think of the situation. Of course, Hidetoshi believes the culprit should receive some sort of punishment. However, the goal isn't simply to punish rule breakers, but instead to rehabilitate them. It leaves Hidetoshi feeling rather torn, and while we head home for the day, he remains behind to work on his list of suspects. The following student council meeting is cancelled, however, and when we arrive, Chihiro informs us that one of the teachers called Hidetoshi into his office, fuming. Rushing over to the office, we catch the two of them in an argument. Apparently, some students had come forward with accounts of us wandering the streets at midnight, convincing the teacher that we must be suspicious. Hidetoshi, however, is refusing to write our name down on his list of suspects. For his defiance, the teacher ends whatever deal he had with Hidetoshi and sends him away. Finding us listening in on their conversation, he reassures us that we don't need to plead our innocence to him, as he knows that we are not the culprit. Having come to not only know us, but respect us as well, he promises he would never sell us out as a scapegoat before heading out for the day with quite a bit on his mind. Whatever it is that's troubling him, it seems Hidetoshi wishes to confide in us, as he quietly asks to meet him in private after the council meeting. Meeting with him atop the roof of the school, he tells us that the cigarette butt incident is being dropped. The real reason he was so gung-ho about finding the culprit was his desire to become the next student council president next year, and the PE teacher agreed to endorse him if Hidetoshi could find who left behind the butt. However, that offer expired when Hidetoshi refused the teacher's orders. Now, the student body hates him, he has no endorsement for student council president, and he's proved himself as the kind of person that values personal power over upholding the rules. But now, taking a step back, he's come to realize that one cannot rule without the trust of those beneath him, and trust is something that has to be earned, not taken. He was becoming the same type of person as the PE teacher who would abuse his power and bend the truth to fit whatever narrative he wanted to sell. But in that moment, Hidetoshi valued our friendship over gaining more power, and realized he had lost his way. This change in Hidetoshi's mindset doesn't take long to present itself. During the final student council meeting we attend with Hidetoshi, we help him with a presentation on the proper way to wear a school uniform. Rather than asserting his own strict standards, he instead turns the conversation to the rest of the council, asking for their opinions. It stirs a few comments from the other members, mostly about how Hidetoshi is actually trying to listen to their opinions now, and once the meeting is over, he asks us how we think he did. He understands that he may have given the impression that he's a selfish person, but hopes he can win back people's trust over time. What's amazing, however, is that it's already working. After spending some time trying to listen to others and showing concern for them, the real culprit came to him and confessed their guilt. Rather than turning him in, Hidetoshi listened to the student's confession, and in the end, the student gave him his lighter along with his word that he would quit smoking. He hands the lighter over to us to hang on to, and with it, we unlock the ability to fuse the persona Odin, the one-eyed patriarch of the Nordic pantheon. Hidetoshi brings up the story he told us beforehand about the reporter, because as it turns out, the writer sent to prison was his father. He now sees the truth in his father's words and his values of sincerity, finding a new respect for him. And after all that contemplation and self-reflection, Hidetoshi realizes that we've never actually hung out outside of school, inviting us to get a bite to eat somewhere on the way home. Of all the student-related social links, Hidetoshi is my favorite, though he didn't start off that way. At first, I had been put off by the way Hidetoshi looked down on those around him. He starts off with the negative traits of the Reversed Emperor, especially his belief that strict adherence to the rules is the only way to live, which only grows worse as the social link progresses. Hidetoshi throws himself into the investigation to secure himself the chance to become the student council president, resorting to accusing people without evidence, and even turning upon those close to him within the student council. It isn't until he's asked to throw us under the bus, potentially getting us expelled, that reality sinks in, and he starts to question what kind of leader he wants to be. Even if he's looking down on others, you can still see that Hidetoshi cares for the other students with his views on punishment, preferring to rehabilitate those that break the rules rather than just outright punishing them. Rehabilitation leads to less chances the rules will be broken again in the future, and if you want to rehabilitate someone and convince them to see things as you do, then you'll need to sincerely approach them on their level. We see this happening with the investigation, as it isn't until Hidetoshi chooses to back off from his pursuit and instead start listening to the other students that he earns enough trust that the culprit comes to him all on his own. Hidetoshi approached the situation with kindness rather than righteous fury, and for it, he was rewarded with the student's word that he would not reoffend. What I love about this social link is that character growth that Hidetoshi undergoes. He comes to see that he does not want to be the kind of ruler that leads through fear and intimidation, as he would have become the same type of person that not only the teacher is, but the television executives were that put his father into jail, twisting the truth to save themselves and to cling to their own power at the cost of those beneath him. It's one of the more well-earned feelings of a character's arcana flipping from the reverse position into the upright, and I think part of it comes down to Hidetoshi doubling down on those negative traits, only to pull back when he realized he was going too far and making a sincere effort to become the type of leader he was born to be. Hidetoshi isn't the only student we could form a relationship with in the student council. There, we can also find the symbol of truth and equality in the Justice Arcana. True to its name, Justice is concerned with all things fair and honest, valuing accountability, adherence to the law, and the concept that actions have consequences. It is also the arcana that seeks to address conflicts and bring them to a just and fair resolution. Seen through the reversed lens, these ideals are instead inverted, and injustice, dishonesty, and corruption take hold. Decisions are made on emotion or misinformation, and falsehoods may lead to an incorrect conclusion that brings further harm. After joining the student council, the treasurer, Chihiro, can be found standing outside of the council room facing the wall. Approaching her and trying to speak with her, she'll lash out at us and drive us away. Through repeated conversations, however, Chihiro admits that she gets nervous around men and didn't mean to come across as hostile, eventually warming up to the idea of spending some time with us. On the way home, she apologizes for her nervous disposition, admitting that since there are so many boys in the student council, she should probably work on her issues. When we reach the dorm, she apologizes again, as she was trying to think of a topic we would be interested in, but didn't come up with anything. It's only then that she admits that she lives in the opposite direction, but didn't mention anything during the walk. Yet, she thanks us for our company before running off in the direction of home. The next time we hang out with Chihiro, the two of us head to the bookstore at Iwatodai Station, spending time looking around at the books rather than just walking home. She'll apologize again for how long she took to look around and for ignoring us for most of that time, before realizing that they may be disturbing others nearby with our conversation. Although she's worried we're not really interested in hanging out with her, Chihiro admits that she felt like she could be herself, thanking us for helping her with this big step forward. Rather ironically, considering her position as the treasurer, Chihiro struggles with math and so will offer to help tutor her in the library. In fact, she was assigned the role of treasurer without her input, and just got stuck with the role. The conversation about all this annoys two other students who end up leaving the library to go make out elsewhere in the school. Chihiro grows irritated at their wanton behavior, so far as declaring that such acts should not be tolerated by the school. Her proclamation is a little on the loud side, however, attracting everyone's attention, and so Chihiro lets the subject drop for now, but intends to bring it up at the next council meeting. The next time we're with Chihiro, however, is at Chagall Cafe, where she doesn't seem to be feeling well. Between being unable to finish her lunch and her unusually pale look, she's grown worried she's catching a cold, and asks us to accompany her to the pharmacy nearby. While Chihiro runs in, we wait just by the fountain, where we can see a man walk up to her when she comes out. The man is a little too interested in where Chihiro is running off to and what it was she bought at the pharmacy, and so we step in to get him to back off. Once he leaves, Chihiro expresses her worry that we were going to get into a fight to protect her, and despite her fear subsiding, she's still shaking. Helping calm her down, she still feels rather flustered and claiming that she must still be feeling sick, she runs off for home. When hanging out at the strip mall, Chihiro seems to be rather distracted and confides in us that her health hasn't been great since the incident at the mall. However, it seems that this illness is one of the heart, as she's been having dreams about us every night. From this point on, the social link goes down the romantic route, and Chihiro will become angry if she sees us with another woman. She does mention, though, that through her time with us, she's slowly started to overcome her fear of men. While she's only able to talk to people she knows, she's almost worked up the courage to look them in the eyes as well. It isn't much, but it is progress. With the breaks at school being so short, she's unable to spend any time with us then, and so the two of us head to the bookstore to find something else to occupy her time. There, Chihiro spies a few books about manga she's been wanting to read, but with how expensive they are, she would be unable to afford one, let alone the entire set. As we leave, Chihiro laments how she wishes she had a larger allowance, but that would also put a larger strain on her mother. A nearby outburst from a woman yelling at her boyfriend about buying her a purse causes Chihiro to sympathize with the man. It was evident that the man was not very self-confident and used money to hold on to his partner at all costs. There are so many things in this world Chihiro cannot afford to buy, and yet she ponders the saying, money can't buy happiness. It can, however, buy that set of books, and so the first chance she gets after school, Chihiro tries to drag us back to the bookstore to look at it. On the way out, the two of us are stopped by two students claiming that some of their fees haven't been paid, despite having given Chihiro the money for them. Chihiro tells them that she did give the money to the teachers, but as she was the last to see it, the students accused the whole incident of being her fault. When we stand up for her, she brightens up a little bit, but the two students tell her to figure it out, before word spreads that she kept the money. Chihiro insists that she didn't steal it and starts trying to look for a way to prove her innocence. Since it's her problem, she tells us that it'll be up to her to figure it out by herself. Despite investigating around the school, the missing fee money hasn't turned up anywhere, and Chihiro is beginning to feel everyone's eyes on her back. Unable to take the pressure anymore, she flees from the library where the two of us were studying, leaving us to listen to the gossip from the others around us. Supposedly, it was 2,500 yen per person from an entire class, with the rumors being that she stole it to support her single mother. When the two gossiping girls leave the library, Chihiro comes back to leave school for the day with us. As we start to leave, Chihiro tells us that we're the only person she has to turn to, and when we suggest talking to the teacher she handed it to, she tells us she doesn't want to come across as though she's accusing him of stealing. She's relied on us up until this point, and despite wanting to try to handle the situation herself, it's clear that she still lacks the confidence to solve the problem at its source. The problem is left to fester for so long that inevitably the two of us are called into the student council room to speak to the president. When we arrive and find Mitsuru waiting for us, Chihiro rightfully guesses we were called here about the rumors. Mitsuru, however, asks to hear Chihiro's side of the story rather than relying on gossip alone. Chihiro will try to work up the nerve to talk about what has happened, but even now is unable to do so. Mitsuru reassures her that she knows Chihiro didn't steal the money and explains that this was his test to see if Chihiro could prove her innocence, something Chihiro admits that it's unlikely she can do. All she has is her word that she gave the money to the teacher, and without the confidence to stand up for herself, she'd likely fold under any scrutiny. When Mitsuru suggests we meet up with her that night to find a way to deal with the issue, Chihiro finally speaks up, finding it unacceptable that the two of us would be alone together in Mitsuru's room. In order to prevent that from happening, Chihiro storms off to talk to the teacher herself, prompting us to follow along after her. In the faculty lounge, Chihiro is already confronting the teacher, who finally admits that the whole scenario is actually his fault. That day, he had missed the train and used the money to pay for a taxi. He intended to replace the money, but it ended up slipping his mind, resulting in the money never making it to the school. He promises to return the money and explain to the class what had happened before Mitsuru chastises him for his actions. With the situation now handled, Chihiro pulls us out of the lounge and up to the roof. She's ecstatic that she managed to not only stand up to the teacher, but that her confidence came from the thought of us and Mitsuru being alone together. According to her mother, Chihiro had always been quite timid unless it came to something she deeply cared about. Only then would she get fired up and stand for what she believes in. That said, she does head back down to give Mitsuru an apology for her outburst. During our last hangout, Chihiro brings us to her home to meet her mother, who is stuck staying late at work, and to show off the set of books she decided to buy. It may have cost her entire allowance, but it was worth it in her eyes, and gifts us with a manga from her collection by the same author. When we go to leave, Chihiro asks us to stay a little longer, as she's heard of men assaulting women in the area at night. As we spend the night with her and end her social link, we unlock the ability to fuse Melchizedek, the biblical king of Salem. I think the biggest problem that I have with Chihiro's story is the same problem that I have with Yuko's, in that it takes a long time for the actual story to start. In this instance, however, I can also appreciate why it takes so long to get there. Chihiro starts off as rather timid and nervous with an intense fear of men that she struggles to get over, and the first half of the social link is supposed to be Chihiro finding her confidence before it's put to the test. We provide a safe and nurturing presence that Chihiro can use to grow accustomed to men, as well as having someone to back her up when she needs it. It's slow at first until the 7th encounter where the mystery of the missing money is presented. It's the rumors that are spread around that are the closest tie to her arcana, with Chihiro being falsely accused of a crime that she did not commit. It's a situation that is ultimately up to Chihiro to overcome in order to earn her confidence. It's not as strong of a link to the arcana as other social links, with Chihiro needing to learn to deal with conflict in a calm and confident manner, and I never really felt as though she was gaining any confidence outside of speaking with Makoto. The storyline even attempts to throw a bit of doubt Chihiro's way by presenting the books she's been wanting just before the money goes missing, but there hadn't been any hints in her character up until this point that would even suggest she would be capable of stealing the money for herself. It's not terrible, and the outline is there for a great story of learning to stand up for oneself, but I think it could have used just a little bit more. Maybe a few moments where she attempts to display her growing confidence, such as talking to the bookstore owner before backing off and coming back later to show her growth. It did receive a few tweaks with reload, such as Chihiro confirming that her fear of men comes from the look of her father's anger, but if it were up to me, I'd rather see that aspect of her story drop to give the rest of it more time to breathe. This month, as we work our way through the second half of the Arca block, we will have 2 other party members besides the first. While Mitsuru only became a playable party member after Fuka joined the team, Akihiko has been available for a short while now, and as such we can start the next few analyses with him and his persona, Polydeuces. Polydeuces is more often known by the name Pollux, and is one of the many children fathered by Zeus in Greek mythology. Where his story differs, however, is that Polydeuces has a twin brother through his mother Leda, but the two of them do not share a father. Where Polydeuces is a demigod due to the interference of Zeus, his half-brother Castor was born immortal. The two would become recognized as great heroes of Sparta, with their deeds including joining Jason and the Argonauts on their voyage, and as the two that would rescue their sister Helen after she was kidnapped by Theseus. Perhaps their most well-known myth, however, is when they aspired to marry the Leucipides. The Leucipides were 2 women named Phoebe and Hilera, daughters of Prince Leucippus, and at the time had already been betrothed to the cousins of Polydeuces and Castor named Lynceus and Etus. As they attempted to abscond with the 2 women, Polydeuces and Castor were confronted by their cousins, resulting in a battle breaking out between the 2 sides. During the battle, Polydeuces would take the life of Lynceus, but Castor would fall at the hands of Etus. Enraged, Zeus himself would kill Oedipus in retribution, and turning to his mourning son, decided to extend him an offer. If Polydeuces wished, he could be taken up into the great halls of Mount Olympus, and live out the rest of his immortal days among the gods. Alternatively, he could bestow half of his immortality onto his brother, the two of them spending half of their time in the underworld and the other half on Olympus. Polydeuces would choose to spend an eternity with his brother, and the two of them would be forever remembered in the night sky as the constellation of Gemini. The connections to Akihiko are, initially, rather hard to piece together. It was said Polydeuces was a rather skilled boxer, and besides that, there isn't much, but that's only because Akihiko is half of the story. Akihiko's persona is not only a reflection of himself, but also the one that holds his partner persona, Shinjiro Aragaki. The game doesn't dig into their relationship until a bit later, but it does start sprinkling the seeds throughout the story of the falling out between the two of them. As we'll come to see, Shinji was once a member of SEAS but decided to quit the team for some unknown reason. This is the metaphorical death that befell the mortal Castor, with the immortal Polydeuces still carrying the torch by fighting back against the Dark Hour. This fight is one Aragaki continuously tries to bring Shinji back into throughout the story to little success, and in this case, the offer for immortality is one rejected by Castor. We get a look at Shinji's persona closer to the end of the game, but for the sake of providing a clear picture, I'll be looking at designs of both Polydeuces and Castor, rather than separating the two. As brothers, the two share a number of similar features, notably the design of their heads, the length and color of their hair, and the armor styled as bulletproof vests that they are wearing. Beyond that, however, the two are very different. Besides the colors, with Polydeuces dressed in a soft blue and Castor dressed in black, each has a few details to take note of, although personally I find Castor more interesting. Of note, Polydeuces seems to have some sort of needle attached to his right arm, which, even after doing some research, I can't seem to find what it is in reference to. It could be some mythological connection I had missed, or perhaps a nod towards the persona's electric affinity in some way. Castor, on the other hand, is much easier to read where its design comes from, namely the two most distinguishing features. Polydeuces and Castor were known to be skilled in riding horses, represented by the horse-like mount Castor rides into battle on. Specifically, it is a sort of hobby horse, although this one is much more stylized than the typical children's toy. What's more interesting, though, is the large spear sticking out of Castor's chest, as it was the spear from his cousin Oedipus that ultimately killed him. Akihiko and Shinjiro had another friend when they were younger, as it was Mitsuru that would bring them into SEAS in the larger conflict regarding the Dark Hour. By then, she already had her persona Penthesilea, and now that she has returned to the fight, leaving the support role to Fuka, we can take a look at the natural-born leader. Penthesilea was known as one of the queens of the Amazons in Greek myth, a group of fierce women that were known for their strength and independence from men. They were referenced across numerous myths, and in each case, they are led by noble queens, such as Otrera, the first Amazon queen, Hippolyte in the myths of both Heracles and Theseus, and Thalestris in the legend of Alexander the Great. Penthesilea herself became a queen after killing her sister Hippolyte in a hunting accident, and is only mentioned beyond that in the Trojan War. After the sin of the accident was washed away by Priam, the king of Troy, she agreed to lead her forces to aid in the defense of the city. From here, there are various tellings of the myth giving conflicting accounts. In one version, Penthesilea led an entire army at her back, while in another, she only brought a small force of 12 elite warriors. Regardless of the size of her army, Penthesilea took to the battlefield, quickly proving herself to be an indomitable force. Many great warriors would meet the end of her blade cut down before her, until at last she stood face to face with the great hero, Achilles. Achilles was a fierce warrior on the side of the Greeks, said to be invulnerable to all threats due to the blessing of his mother. At birth, Achilles was dipped into the river Styx by one ankle, granting him immunity against all attacks everywhere the water touched him. This left only his ankle as a vulnerable spot, which would prove to be his downfall. Once again, there are two different tellings of what happened when Achilles and Penthesilea clashed swords. One telling says that Achilles managed to overpower and kill Penthesilea, while another alleges that she managed to gain the upper hand and win the fight. Once Achilles died, he would be resurrected by Zeus at the request of his mother Thetis. Once arisen, Achilles slew Penthesilea, and after removing her helmet and viewing her beautiful face, mourned the woman he had just killed. Achilles would be mocked by another soldier, Thersites, for having fallen in love with the dead queen after killing her, and gouged out her eyes in order to taunt him. Achilles would then murder Thersites as punishment and later sail for Lesbos to be purified of the weight of his actions. Admittedly, there isn't all that much to the story of Penthesilea, but what we do have is enough to connect back to the central core of Mitsuru's character, which is her fierce leadership. In all aspects of her life, she is the leader of those around her, such as being the leader of Seas in her private life, the student council president in her academic life, and the heiress to the Kirijo group in her professional life. She even leads the team into a Trojan war of their own, seeking a way to forever end the Dark Hour by venturing into Tartarus. And seeing as Penthesilea was a warrior queen, it would make much more sense that Mitsuru is better in a combat role rather than support. Before Fuka joins the team, Mitsuru does her job well of supporting any explorations into Tartarus, but with Penthesilea wielding two weapons, it's much more apparent that it's more combat-oriented. These weapons are actually a rapier and a parrying dagger, and while Mitsuru herself wields single-handed swords in the battle, the parrying dagger does express a bit more of Mitsuru's mindset. It has the same purpose as a standard shield being used for defense, but a parrying dagger requires a lot more elegance and a lot more skill in order to be used effectively. Not only that, but it is a lot more of an offensive tool since, as the name would suggest, its primary use was for parrying the attacks of others rather than simply blocking them. The courtly attire the persona is dressed in also calls to mind Mitsuru's position within society. As the heiress to the Kirijo group, she could be seen as being part of a noble family, bringing with it all of the responsibilities such a position would hold, as well as explaining some of the more typically noble traits Mitsuru carries. With their place above society, medieval nobility took a higher interest in education and sophistication, and as such, activities such as fencing or adopting multiple languages were a common practice. Historically, these were restricted to noble men, with women being objects to be bartered and sold for political favor, but with the Amazons being a matriarchy, these ideas are instead reversed. We also get a bit of the telling of the myth through Penthesilea's head, as while she does wear a crown to signify her role as the queen, she also covers her face with a helmet. True to the myth, Penthesilea's face is concealed, as it wasn't until Achilles killed her and removed her helmet that he saw her beauty, and while Mitsuru may not wear such an obvious mask herself, it does become increasingly clear over the story that she is hiding something. The what we will get to in time, but we can already start to piece together the why by looking at a rather minor detail. Examining Penthesilea's breastplate, the left one seems to have a greater degree of reinforcement, and it just so happens that a person's heart is located on the left side of their body. This secret, whatever it may be, is likely being kept under wraps not only to protect the other members of Seas, but to also spare Mitsuru the pain of having it uncovered. On the eve of July, Pharos grants Makoto another warning. The full moon is upon him once more, and another ordeal will stand against him. Makoto will be seeing him again once this has come to pass, as the party continues their spiral towards the fall. More of the lost have been gathering lately, just like all the previous months as the full moon approached, although there's something rather unusual about the cases this time. According to the rumors floating around Gekkoukan, people have been found unconscious in pairs of two, primarily around the hotels of Shirakawa Boulevard. This odd change makes no real difference to the team's plans, and so once the full moon arrives, everyone gathers together in the control room as Fuka begins to sweep over the city with her power. Their theory about the connection to the phases of the moon is confirmed once Fuka spots a powerful shadow within the city. Specifically, it seems to be inside of a building on Shirakawa Boulevard. Given the reputation of that street and the rumors of everyone being found in pairs, Mitsuru and Ikutsuki piece together the implications, leaving Fuka questioning what the connection is. Shirakawa Boulevard has a bit of a reputation, as there are numerous hotels with the explicit purpose of being a place for couples to hook up. Ikutsuki tries to dismiss the reputation, stating that the hotels are no different from any other, but it leaves Yukari feeling uncomfortable all the same. As she offers to sit this mission out, Junpei goads her by calling her a little kid, and she agrees to come along on the condition she isn't left behind like last time. Mitsuru assigns Makoto to remain as the team's leader for the operation, and assigns Fuka to serve as their support. Other than that, it's up to Makoto who to bring along, and once he's decided on the other two, they quickly head over and infiltrate the Shadow's den. As they enter, Fuka detects that the Shadow is positioned on the 3rd floor within a grand bedroom, and so Makoto and the others climb the stairs to the top. There, a large, ornate door conceals what lies within, and without hesitation, they all step inside. The Shadow sits there waiting for their arrival, and with nowhere for it to run, the party moves in to destroy it. This Shadow is the representative for the Hierophant Arcana, which is typically the arcana of knowledge, tradition, and community. The actual card is meant to illustrate a religious figure, which this Hierophant is seemingly dressed as. The red, white, and gold robes are akin to religious vestments, and while it is a bit hard to see, the creature is wearing what looks to be a kippa, which are hats worn by those of Jewish faith as a sign of reverence for God. In this case, however, the Hierophant serves as a dark reflection of the Arcana's teachings, and indulges in its own twisted desires. The Shadow is overly large, the buttons of its robe barely holding the clothing together, and the feminine figure pampering it is actually the backrest of the chair that it is sitting on. With the way that it kicks its short and stubby legs, flailing about as its motherly figure takes care of it, it almost makes me think of a large child or an adult that never actually grew up. Along with the 2 paper dolls on either side, we can start to see more of the religious aspects taking shape, positioning the Hierophant as some sort of a cult leader. The dolls look as though they are being crucified with their arms outstretched, and serve as decorations for the Hierophant's power rather than as separate threats. As for what sort of cult the Hierophant is preaching to, its signature move Prophecy of Ruin points towards the idea of a doomsday cult. It has created a sort of twisted sense of community, with those around it all looking up towards it as a prophet that must be taken care of, even as it speaks words of fear into their minds. As for why this Shadow would be positioned in a love hotel, it is likely pointing towards the bending and breaking of common religious practices. It is evident by the design of the Hierophant itself that it overindulges in all that it does. And while one would think of gluttony due to its size, lust is another sin that this Shadow is guilty of. Especially among the Christian faith, priests take a vow of abstinence and celibacy, devoting their lives towards God instead of pleasures of the flesh. And yet there are many that view sex not as a temptation towards sin, but a weapon to keep followers in line. Among many cults, sex is strictly prohibited by its followers between each other, with only the cult's leader being allowed to give and to take. It's a vile tactic to help sow a frustration in the followers that only the leader can help relieve, furthering their dependency on the cult leader and associating them with the pleasure only they can provide. The chair in this case almost feels like a concubine with the large chest and fishnet legs beneath it, tying further into this idea. The head of this throne is a sort of cross with 6 bars to it, although the cross has long since bent with the breaking of vows and tradition. The fight itself isn't too interesting, and the Hierophant just soaks in hits while throwing back electric attacks. It's by this point in the game where each of the full moon bosses become damage sponges, taking either time or managing buffs to take them down. The only real threat is the aforementioned Prophecy of Ruin, inflicting fear across the party. Fear comes with a few main drawbacks, starting with the afflicted individual having a chance to paralyze and fright for a turn. Each afflicted party member also has a small chance to flee from the battle, leaving the party a man down for the rest of the fight. Those that are under the effects of fear are also vulnerable to the ghastly wail ability, instantly killing them. Thankfully, the Hierophant's Shadow doesn't have anything like that, and so taking it down is a straightforward endeavor. After its defeat, Fuka congratulates the team and informs them that she'll be waiting outside, but when they try to leave the room, the doors are locked. It seems the Hierophant wasn't the only Shadow somewhere in this room, as Fuka detects another powerful presence. As the party searches around the room, nothing seems to be too out of the ordinary until they approach the mirror on the wall. As they all stare deep into it, however... Whoa there, hang on. We're just gonna move on from here. Whatever it was that happened, Makoto awakens inside one of the rooms, listening to the shower running. As he tries to concentrate on what's going on, a voice in his head, claiming to be his inner self, urges him to embrace the pleasure awaiting him in just the other room. As he tries to resist the voice, focusing on some mission he had to accomplish, the voice pushes back until Makoto breaks through and the fog over his mind clears. Yukari would also break free as she emerged from the washroom, and finding herself in nothing but a towel, she would slap Makoto and run back behind closed doors. Only now would Fuka manage to get through, contacting Makoto and Yukari after a long period of silence from the entire team. Thankfully, the enemy is still in the same room as before, but it has the entire building locked down, and so the two of them will need to regroup with the others before coming up with a new plan. When Yukari comes back out, fully clothed, she threatens Makoto to never speak of this again. The other two party members are just upstairs, and once everyone is reunited, any suggestions of odd occurrences are brushed off by both sets of people. The awkward atmosphere is broken when Fuka detects the shadow's energy elsewhere within the hotel, maintaining the barrier that's keeping the doors sealed. Lesser shadows wander the halls, making traversing the hotel much more dangerous, but hidden in the rooms are the keys to opening the door to the shadow. Each room has a large mirror hanging on one of the walls, and for the most part they all seem to be rather mundane. Those tied to the shadow, however, are akin to the mirror where the Hierophant was hiding away, in that the party cannot see the reflections in them. Only by smashing the two odd mirrors does the door upstairs unlock, allowing the party to head back in and find the source of the mind control. Seeing as this is a hotel, there's also a lot of fun background gags that can be found within the coffins. For the most part, the coffins can be seen either sitting on the couches or laying in bed, but in Reload we can use our imagination to fill in the blanks about what these three coffins are doing on the bed. This time, as they enter the grand bedroom, another monstrous shadow waits for them, and for the second time this night, the party moves in for a fight. This shadow, the source of the unconscious couples, is of the Lover's Arcana, and one interpretation of the card is the concepts of connection, communication, and harmony. Another is the idea of choices or standing at a crossroads in life. Of course, this is often seen through the lens of relationships, and it is here that the reversal of the Arcana starts to break its ideals down. Based on the shadow's actions, it strips away any sort of choice from its victims, forcing them to perform for its own carnal desires. Communication between those affected breaks down, and only after they entertain each other does the shadow move in and devour their psyche, leaving them broken with apathy syndrome. The twin symbols of Mars and Venus inside the creature, often associated as symbols of masculinity and femininity, may also point towards the loose mindset of the Lover's shadow, pairing people up exclusively based on their sex rather than any sort of compatibility of their personalities. The actual body of the Lover's shadow is some sort of pink gel or liquid contained within a golden cage, giving it a heart-shaped design. However, with the small head just on the top, the design also brings to mind a perfume bottle, albeit one that is broken and leaking everywhere, forming the wings on either side. It's possible that that is how the shadow ensnares its victims, using a sort of pheromone or perfume scent to enchant their minds, toying with its food before devouring them. This fight is also much more difficult than the Hierophant, serving as the true test for the player this full moon, and the primary reason for that is its reliance on a different status effect than the Hierophant, this one being Charm. The Lovers will frequently try to charm the player's party members using abilities like Marin Karin, Holy Arrow, and Sexy Dance, turning them into unwilling puppets. Those that are charmed will turn their attacks towards other members of the party, or even adding healing and buffs onto the enemy, making it a particularly annoying status effect to deal with. Even then, the Lovers have other tricks at its disposal, even once the entire party has fallen under its sway. One example is the spell Heartbreaker, as it will hit everyone in the party, but the damage will be doubled against charmed targets. However, the party manages to power through it, resisting the shadow's allure and ridding it from the world once and for all. With the mission finally clear, the group reconvenes outside the hotel, where Mitsuru praises Fuka's work in supporting the team throughout the mission, and Makoto and Yukari for resisting the Shadow's mind control. Mitsuru and Akihiko head on ahead back to the dorm, but before the rest head back, Fuka lets Yukari know that she may have found something related to what they had discussed the other day. Yukari quickly agrees to talk about it later, and when saying they should all head back, notices that Junpei seems rather down. At this point, he can't hide his jealousy anymore, moaning about how Makoto got to be the hero once again, and when Yukari jokingly pokes at him for it, Junpei snaps at her and heads back to the dorm by himself. The rest of the team would follow suit, but they would be unaware that they were being watched the entire time. From atop a nearby rooftop, Strega sat back and observed their mission, with their leader Takaya commenting on just how busy Seas seems to have been lately, especially with their frequent forays into Tartarus. They had been trying to decide whether the troublesome kids are their enemies, and when Takaya turns towards his second-in-command, Jin, it's suggested that they pay a little visit to another that shares their fate. After all, they don't have much time left. Ikutsuki would want to hear of the team's success, and so after a few days he arrives at the dorm to hear the team's report, as well as to discuss more of his research. Mitsuru would fill him in on the difficult operation, confirming that the shadows are indeed growing stronger, but before Ikutsuki can continue on, Yukari butts in. So much has happened since she joined, but there's still a lot that she doesn't know. Over time, she's begun to grow rather suspicious and tells Mitsuru that she knows that she's hiding something from the rest of the team. Something relating to Tartarus, the Dark Hour, and the accident 10 years ago. Although no students were harmed during the accident, a great number were reported as being absent from school in the following days. Yukari and Fuka had been digging into some old records, and curiously enough, those students all collapsed and had to be hospitalized, just like the victims of the Empress and Emperor shadows. These were the first recorded cases of apathy syndrome, and considering the Kirijo group, Mitsuru's family company, built Gekkoukan High School, she must know something. Mitsuru apologizes, explaining that, while she never intended to hide anything, the information just never seemed relevant to their mission. Ikutsuki encourages her to open up about what happened all those years ago, reminding her that it wasn't her fault, and finally, Mitsuru begins her explanation. The shadows hold many unique and strange abilities, and according to some research, they may even be able to manipulate time and space. There were those that sought to use the shadows as tools, harnessing their power, and 14 years ago, their experiments began. Experiments headed by Koetsu Kirijo, Mitsuru's grandfather.
My grandfather was obsessed with shadows. He wanted to harness their power and create something extraordinary.
Harness their power?
He assembled a team of scientists, and over several years collected a significant number of shadows.
He what? Damn, that's freaking crazy!
However, 10 years ago, during the final stages of the experiment, they lost control of the shadow's power. Consequently, the nature of the world was altered.
You mean?
Yes, Tartarus and the Dark Hour.
The shadows that the scientists had collected split into several larger variations and escaped into the surrounding city, and the shadows that Seas has been encountering every full moon are what remain of those that were contained. As for why Gekkoukan transforms into Tartarus during the Dark Hour, Mitsuru confirms Yukari's suspicions that the experiments were performed there in secret. Tatsumi Port Island was a highly populated area, meaning a greater number of shadows would congregate there, and since the Kirijo group had a great deal of influence there, the school was the perfect place for them to operate. This revelation only fuels Yukari's anger, accusing Mitsuru of having deceived everyone into helping her clean up her family's mess. She goes so far as to ask Akihiko whether or not he knew that they were all just being used, or remained silent so long as he got the chance to fight. Mitsuru apologizes once more, as convincing people to join their hunt was her highest priority. With their personas, only they are capable of ending the Dark Hour once and for all, and implying that not everyone was given the choice on whether or not they wanted to fight this battle. Ikutsuki breaks the argument up, telling Yukari that it was those in the past that are at fault, all of whom paid with their lives in the accident. None of them deserve this burden that has been given to them, and now that those shadows have returned after a decade-long absence, it is on their shoulders to deal with it. However, that activity means they can be hunted down and destroyed, leading to the good news Ikutsuki was hoping to announce. In his research, it seems as though those 12 shadows are the cause of the Dark Hour, and if all of them were eliminated, then the Dark Hour would disappear for good. It sets a concrete goal for the group to strive towards, and knowing when the shadows will appear, and knowing they are gaining strength, all they can do is grow stronger and kind and take them out. Not only that, but there are still some mysteries that are as of yet unsolved, such as why Tartarus appeared in the first place, and it is only by moving forward will they have a hope of putting the pieces together. After the meeting, Makoto is given the chance to talk to Ikutsuki to clear up any lingering questions he may have, providing some useful information. For instance, after the accident, the public would turn on the Kirijo group, and looking for a scapegoat, the blame would be placed upon a single employee. As for Mitsuru's involvement with everything, she's known all about the Dark Hour and personas since she was a child. The reason for that, however, were the numerous experiments performed on her, until she manifested a persona of her own, becoming the first member of SEAS. Akihiko would join later when the two of them were in middle school, though at the time, SEAS had a third member that Ikutsuki doesn't elaborate on. The following day, Akihiko would visit that former member hanging out behind Port Island Station. Shinjiro's initial reaction to seeing him is to tell him to stop trying to convince him to come back, but Akihiko has just come to see how his old friend is doing. He starts to reminisce of when the two of them and Miki were in the orphanage nearly 14 years ago. Back then, everything seemed so carefree, like they had all the time in the world, but Shinji puts a stop to the nostalgia, telling Akihiko to save all that for his new friends. He notes that it's rare for Akihiko to look back on the past instead of charging towards the future, which means something is obviously on his mind. That something is that they now know how to end the Dark Hour, which immediately catches Shinji's attention. All this time, Akihiko was only focused on getting stronger, but Yukari's accusations the night prior made him start to question his reasons for fighting in the first place. Hearing that, Shinjiro offers his own words of wisdom, stating that everyone has their own reasons to fight, but one can always quit if their reasons aren't good enough, just like he did. Akihiko, however, is not Shinjiro, and after saying his goodbyes, heads back to the dorm. It's back at the dorm that Mitsuru knocks on Fuka's door, asking to come in. When the two sit down to chat, Mitsuru points out that not only is Fuka a valuable asset in battle, but also has a bit of a gift for finding information, seeing what she managed to uncover about the accident. Although Fuka tries to apologize for digging into the matter, Mitsuru tells her not to worry about it, as she's actually come to ask Fuka to continue her search. Not much of it was made public, and so Mitsuru has come to grant Fuka access to the Kirijo group's private databases. To free Fuka from accountability, she will be given Mitsuru's own login credentials, so that any fallout will land on her shoulders instead. With what happened last night, Mitsuru is tired of living in the dark, and wants to know exactly what happened the night of the accident. Fuka agrees to look into it, much to Mitsuru's appreciation, but as she leaves, Mitsuru asks whether or not Fuka resents her. After all, she dragged Fuka and everyone else into a battle without fully explaining all that she knew, and there are surely others that are just as mad as Yukari is. To Fuka, however, SEAS has been a blessing. She comes from a family of doctors, including her distant relations, with the only exception of her parents. It's created an inferiority complex in them that they have been pushing onto their own daughter, making it hard for Fuka to stay at home. Here at the dorm, however, she feels as though she has a purpose and can be useful to the people around her, and so she has no reason to be mad. Mitsuru confirms that nobody else could take Fuka's place and thanks her for all her support before heading out.
Fuka wouldn't be the only one thinking about her place in the dorm, as in front of the theater at Port Island Station, Junpei would sit down and contemplate. Now, they know how to end the Dark Hour and destroy Tartarus, and while he should be happy that they're getting closer to reaching their goal, he's still pissed off. As two seniors walk out of the theater, talking to each other, Junpei overhears them mentioning applying for college, and the chances of them being accepted. Their conversation helps Junpei come to the realization why he's so mad at himself. Fighting shadows is all he feels good for, and outside of that, he's worthless. Even then, he's not even the best at that one thing he's good at, with Makoto overshadowing him time and time again. Nothing he ever does is good enough, and it's a feeling that leaves Junpei feeling hollow. And yet, one other would be feeling that same emptiness. In her room, Yukari is focused on how her worst fears keep coming true, with those she called friends always deceiving her. In her hands is a letter written to her by her father, and although she's read it 1,000 times since receiving it, she goes through it one more time. The letter is dated from 10 years ago, before the accident, from when it was placed into a time capsule at the opening ceremony for the Moonlight Bridge. In it, Yukari's father wonders what she'll be like in 10 years, when she'll be 16 years old. Lately, she's been sad since he works so late, and yet she always greets him with that same smile. However, he's grown proud of what he's accomplished, and so he was appointed as the head researcher by Mr. Kirijo, and will soon be working on a huge new project. Despite that, nothing is more important to him than Yukari and her mother, hoping that by the time Yukari reads this letter, she'll still be enjoying her life. He ends the letter by saying he hopes that this letter brings a smile to her face whenever she reads it, but as she finishes it, it's not happiness that Yukari feels, but determination. She cannot give up for the sake of her father, vowing that she won't be like her mother and turn her back on everything. With each member of the dorm spending the day thinking over their situation, it only seems natural Makoto would do the same, and as the dark hour arrives, Pharos arrives with it. It's been quite a while since the two first met, and so Pharos asks Makoto how his life has been as a Persona user. In truth, Pharos' reason for coming is that he remembered something else about the fall that he wished to share, as it all started with an incident that happened 10 years ago. The same incident that claimed the lives of both of Makoto's parents. Before he leaves, Pharos comments that a persona is akin to a mirror, and as such, a persona user can never truly escape from who they are. Despite that, Pharos reiterates that he'll stick by Makoto's side as the two of them have become good friends. With all that has happened over the last few days, it's no wonder that the group has been feeling rather tense around each other, and as they sit in the lounge the following evening, it's clear matters have not improved. It's to the point that it feels as though the team is choosing sides, with Akihiko sitting beside Mitsuru, and everyone else sitting on the other side of the table with Yukari. Fuka does her best to break the awkward silence by bringing up how summer break is coming up soon, and asking what plans everyone has. Joining in to lighten the mood, Junpei mentions wishing he could visit the beach, preferably somewhere in the south with crystal clear water. Before he can think about that, however, they all have exams to worry about. Fuka tries to reassure him and brings up wanting to go to a nice beach as well, such as one of the many in Okinawa. It's then that Akutsuki wanders in, suggesting they all head to Yakushima instead. He happened to be in the area and figured he would stop by, as well as to inform Mitsuru that her father will be vacationing in Yakushima around the same time. It would be the perfect opportunity to pay him a surprise visit, and while Mitsuru is a bit apprehensive, Akutsuki reassures her that any father would be happy to see their daughter come all that way to visit. Beyond that, the team has done such a good job up until now, and since they know when the next full moon is, they deserve the opportunity to put their feet up and rest. It's an idea that leaves everyone feeling excited, and when Mitsuru leaves to head upstairs, Yukari chases after her. Catching her at the stairs, Yukari apologizes about the other evening as she got a little carried away. Mitsuru tells her not to worry about it, and it makes sense that the group would go to Yakushima after all that. While Akutsuki had said that all those involved in the experiment died in the accident, in reality, Mitsuru's father was the only survivor. Of course, before they can start planning out their trip, school needs to actually end for summer break, and before that can happen, everyone needs to make it through their final exams. Once exam week has finally ended, Junpei is the first to celebrate, ready to face the shining days of summer break. He and Yukari talk about how well they did on the exams, before Yukari asks if Junpei and Makoto wanted to hang out for the rest of the day. As she heads to her locker to grab her stuff, inviting Fuka along the way, Junpei turns towards Makoto and offers an apology. He admits that he's been a bit of a dick lately and that his insecurities will stay in the past. From here on out, the two of them will have each other's backs. As they head outside, accompanied by Yukari, Fuka, and Akihiko, Junpei turns to Akihiko and asks what he's doing in front of the school. As it turns out, Akutsuki had called him to talk about a potential new member of the team, and as the 5 of them stand there talking about a new recruit, Natsuki rushes out of the school, calling out to Fuka. She asks if Fuka can stay behind to help her with a study session until she remembers that today is the day Fuka was going to head back home. Fuka, however, agrees to help out Natsuki, apologizing to everyone else and telling them that she'll see them later at the dorm. As she and Natsuki walk off, Junpei comments about how much Fuka has changed, with Akutsuki cutting in about how beautiful friendship and youth is. He came all this way to pick someone up and introduce them to the team, and as he motions for someone to follow, a young child walks up. Both Yukari and Junpei recognize him, with Yukari introducing him as Ken, which catches Akihiko off guard. As it turns out, he'll be staying at the dorm over the summer break due to the circumstances surrounding his current living situation. Ken used to live with his mother until she died in an accident almost 2 years ago now. At the moment, a distant relative is paying for his schooling, but staying at the elementary school dorm means staying by himself all summer. As such, he will be staying at the Iwatodai dorm, and when asked whether or not that's a good idea, given the nightly activities, Ikutsuki explains that Ken actually has the potential. That means that Ken is the potential new candidate, although seeing as he's only in elementary school, it's only a possibility for now. Although Akihiko doesn't seem to be pleased with the situation, Ken recognizes him by name, impressed by the rumors that Akihiko has never lost a boxing match. Whatever his anxieties are, however, Akihiko remains silent for the moment. Any thoughts of new recruits, Tartarus, or the Dark Hour are put on hold for the moment, as after a day of travel preparations, the team wakes up early to start their vacation in Yakushima, leaving for 4 days of sun and relaxation on the island.
Awesome! There it is! Yakushima!
After a bit of a tense boat ride, the party arrives at Mitsuru's vacation home, marveling at the opulence of it all. 2 of the manor's staff approach, welcoming them to the home and offering to lead everyone to their rooms. As they are led down the hall, the party stops for a rather intimidating man, who Mitsuru greets as her father, Takeharu Kirijo. He leaves without so much as a word, leaving a bit of an impression on the party, but the moment passes as Mitsuru tells everyone to make themselves at home. Junpei immediately suggests heading down to the beach, urging everyone else to follow him along. Yukari reluctantly agrees, although states that everyone will need time to put down their stuff and get changed first. Not wanting to waste a single minute, however, Junpei rushes off ahead of everyone else. Junpei, Makoto, and Akihiko would be the first to arrive at the beach, and already Akihiko is planning on how he's going to train in the water. Junpei, however, is much more focused on spending the day relaxing and enjoying the sun, as well as to look at the other girls on the beach. It would be then that Yukari, Fuka, and Mitsuru arrive, with Junpei critiquing each of their swimsuits one by one. He sneaks off to the side to ask Makoto which of the girls is his type, and just generally acts like a bit of a creep. As he and Akihiko head off into the water, Makoto holds back for a moment with the odd feeling that he is being watched coming over him. The moment quickly passes as Junpei runs past in the water and Makoto heads in to join them. At this point, we can stay here as long as we want and just hang out with the team. We can sit back on the beach with Mitsuru and Akihiko, or join the others in the water, where Junpei is splashing Yukari and Fuka. Time, and therefore the story, will only move on when we choose to head back to the house, and so we can take a moment to enjoy the calm and the quiet, as that evening would prove to be the most enlightening on the team's situation, and the most troubling. Once everyone returns to the house, Mitsuru meets with her father to say hello and make small talk. Her father, cutting straight to the point, correctly guesses that their guests are the residents of the dorm, and asks why it took Mitsuru so long to talk about the accident 10 years ago. Although she claims she wasn't hiding it, Takeharu tells Mitsuru once again that the blame does not lie on her shoulders, reminding her of their family motto. 2 in harmony surpasses 1 in perfection. That has been their guiding principle since the Kirijo group separated from the Nanjo group, which serves as a little nod towards Kei Nanjo from the first Persona game. Takeharu tells Mitsuru that she needs to learn to better trust other people, bringing up that he knows Mitsuru attempted to access the family's database. Mitsuru could have simply asked him directly rather than using the trip as an excuse to talk to him. Unlike Mitsuru, Takaharu has no intentions of hiding anything from the team, and asks Mitsuru to gather everyone together so that he may disclose all that happened on that night 10 years ago. Before heading off, he does note that Yukari's last name is Takaba, questioning whether or not it must be fate that she awakened to a persona of her own. Once the team is settled within the lounge, Takaharu begins his debriefing. Since Mitsuru has already given them the short version, they already know that his father and those that followed him are to blame. Although Takaharu would rather have paid for his part in it with his life, he has no choice but to rely on all of them to clean up his mess. In truth, Mitsuru's grandfather was hoping to harness the power of the shadows to create a time manipulation device, capable of stopping unwanted events before they ever happened. With it, one could shape the future as they saw fit, but under the watchful eye of Mitsuru's grandfather, the goal of the project began to change. Nihilism gripped his heart, and it's likely his madness came from his desire to escape from those feelings. Rather than telling them about what became of the project, however, he readies a video from the night of the accident. It is the only surviving footage of that night captured by one of the scientists, and as the footage begins playing, Yukari recognizes the voice. In the tape, the scientist describes how his boss has become obsessed with a horrendous idea, and that the experiment should never have started in the first place. He has meddled with the experiment, likely resulting in a terrible accident, but admits that the world would have suffered if he hadn't. He urges any who find this tape to find the powerful shadows dispersed by the explosion, as only by killing them will this nightmare come to an end. He admits that, blinded by the promise of success, he ignored the risks, and now all of this is his fault. As the tape finishes, Yukari stands up in shock, having just witnessed the final moments of her own father. Aichiro Takaba, Yukari's father, was the head researcher of the experiments conducted on the shadows, and pushed to continue his research by the Kirijo group, he sabotaged it in the final stretch, resulting in the accident 10 years ago. While everyone else is stunned into silence, Yukari is forced to grapple with the reality that the Dark Hour, Tartarus, and all who have been harmed by the shadows have her father to blame. When Akihiko tries to ask if she's okay, Yukari turns on Mitsuru, assuming that this was the real reason the truth was hidden from them for so long. Despite Mitsuru's protest that she didn't know about any of this, Yukari storms out, not wanting to sit there and accept any pity. Fuka points out that someone should probably follow after her, and upon Mitsuru's request, Makoto heads out to find Yukari. When Makoto catches up to her, he finds Yukari standing at the shore, staring out into the ocean. Seeing him standing next to her, Yukari brings up what she had told Makoto at the hospital about her father dying when she was really young. In truth, her father died in the accident, and since nobody knew the truth, rumors began to spread. Since Aichiro was the head researcher on the project, the blame was pinned on him, resulting in Yukari and her mother getting chased out of the city. All this time she had believed in her father, thinking he would have never done anything wrong, but now that image has been shattered. Yukari even brings up the letter she had received last April that her father had written, and reading it over and over strengthened her belief in him. When Yukari discovered her power, she decided to work with the Kirijo group to fight back against the shadows, and hopefully uncover the truth of her father's death. Yet, all of her fighting was for nothing. Makoto does his best to try and cheer her up, but Yukari just continues questioning why life has to be so unfair, even voicing why her father had to die instead of Mitsuru's. She immediately feels bad about voicing that thought aloud, and when Makoto tries to reassure her again, Yukari turns on him. All this time, nothing seems to faze Makoto, as though he has no emotions at all, and now he has the gall to try and tell her how to feel. She yells at him that he doesn't know anything about her, but quickly cools herself off and apologizes for her outburst. In truth, her head is a complete mess at the moment, to the point where she doesn't know what to do anymore. Yukari would look to Makoto asking what it is she's supposed to do now, only for Makoto to tell her to keep fighting and to not lose hope. Yukari apologizes again for all of this, as Makoto lost his parents in the accident too, and having gotten used to dealing with stressful situations, she calms herself down. As the mood lightens, with Yukari asking whether Mitsuru asked him to come down or if he followed on his own, Makoto was given the option to offer a private hug under the moonlight. The intimate moment, however, is immediately ruined as Junpei runs over towards them, catching their attention. It's almost the dark hour, so Junpei came to look for the two of them before they got into any danger. They hadn't really considered that the Dark Hour isn't really limited to Tatsumi Port Island and Iwatodai, but now that they're considering it, Yukari starts to speak aloud. Once someone awakens to their persona, they become aware of everything that happens during the Dark Hour, and retain their memories during the night. It's almost as though, in exchange for power, one must trade away their innocence and can no longer look away from the darkness. It all means that, whether she likes it or not, Yukari is stuck with everyone and heads back to the house with Junpei. Before Makoto can follow, that odd feeling returns as though he's being watched, but once again, it soon passes and he rejoins everyone else. The following morning, on their second day of the trip, Yukari, Mitsuru, and Fuka head out for a walk in the woods on the island. As they wander along the trail, Fuka states it's probably a good thing it's just the three of them that came along, considering how Junpei was acting a bit like a pervert the previous day, but it seems both Yukari and Mitsuru are lost in thought. That is, until Akutsuki calls Mitsuru regarding a bit of an issue. He had been checking out the creature group's labs on the island and found that one of the seemingly inoperable machines suddenly left the facility on its own. Now it's somewhere on the island posing a risk to other people. As for what the machine is, Akutsuki describes it as a combat vehicle designed as an anti-shadow weapon. From that description, it almost sounds like a living tank is roaming around the island, but as Mitsuru points out, it may take some time for everyone to regroup to start looking for it. Akutsuki himself is on his way there, urging the three of them to deal with the issue as soon as possible. When Mitsuru asks about taking it down with lethal force, Akutsuki expresses his doubts as to whether or not they'll be able to destroy it, leading them to wonder how they'll even be able to stop it in the first place. Unfortunately, Makoto, Junpei, and Akihiko seem to be unreachable, so for the moment they decide to head back and collect their equipment, then let Fuka try to scan the island. As for where the guys are, the three of them arrive once more at the beach, and it's there that Junpei finally pulls out the note Fuka left behind, informing them that they were heading out to see the Jomon cedar tree. It leaves Junpei a bit distraught that the girls wouldn't want to head down to the beach with them, although Akihiko shuts that down with how Junpei was acting only the previous day. That said, it's now just the three guys hanging out, and if the girls aren't going to join them, then they'll have to find others. Thus, Junpei calls for them to start Operation Babe Hunt, bringing Akihiko and Makoto along for the ride. Neither of them are particularly interested, but Akihiko still appoints Makoto as the leader of the operation as, just as Junpei said, this is an operation like any other. What follows is a series of disastrous attempts to pick up women in college or older that they find on the beach. With Junpei taking the lead at first, his attempts to play catch with the conversation fall apart rather quickly, and with Akihiko giving it a shot, it becomes painfully clear he has no charm with the ladies. The third attempt proves to be a bit more fruitful, with the woman taking an interest in the three of them, even giving them advice for next time until... Oh, that joke did not age well at all. It turns out that the woman is actually trans, and the three guys run off away from her. The whole sequence is rather questionable, although Reload does at the very least update the joke to be a bit less transphobic, with the woman now attempting to sell the three of them snake oil and revealing she's a bit on the crazy side. Regardless, the operation ends in complete failure, and Akihiko and Junpei start arguing over whose fault it is. Each blames the other, even asking Makoto to pick a side on who's in the wrong for their failure, even though the blame lies all around. However, their bickering quickly dissipates as Junpei spots someone standing over by the water. Whoever the strange girl is, the three guys are all in agreement that she's pretty cute, and that this is their last chance to make up for their failures. Rather than the three of them all approaching her at once, however, they decide to go one at a time, and through a game of rock, paper, scissors, Junpei is the first up to the bat. He tries to make conversation with the girl, but she dismisses him quickly as he is not the person she's looking for. Feeling rejected, Junpei heads back to the others with his tail between his legs, giving Akihiko his shot to hit on her. He tries to impress her by bringing up training trivia, and from Junpei and Makoto's perspective, Akihiko actually seems to be having a conversation with her. The victory is short-lived, however, as the girl dismisses Akihiko as well, stating that the provided information is irrelevant to her. Akihiko returns in shame, leaving it up to Makoto to try and win the girl over. The other two try to offer some words of encouragement before Makoto walks up and tries to talk to the girl. As soon as he opens his mouth, the girl actually turns around to look at him, but when Junpei and Akihiko jump out from their hiding spot, the girl decides to execute evasive maneuvers and runs off into the forest. Junpei and Akihiko assume that it's whatever Makoto said to her that made her run off like that, with Junpei telling him to head on after her to apologize. Running off into the forest, Makoto heads down the trail, spying the girl rushing off up ahead, and managing to consistently follow behind. It isn't until he reaches the Jomon Cedar that Makoto catches up with her, feeling as though he's being watched again. When the girl peeks out from behind the large sign, she confirms that Makoto is the person she has been searching for, and quickly rushes over to embrace him. It comes as a huge shock to Junpei and Akihiko following closely behind, as Makoto hadn't even said anything for her to come rushing at him. It's then that the girls arrive, thankful to have finally found the guys. Fuka briefly questions what it is the three of them are doing in the middle of the forest in their swimsuits, before Yukari notices the girl clinging on to Makoto. Regardless of her identity, Mitsuru reminds them that there's an ongoing crisis, and now that the group has been reunited, they will need to return to the vacation house and prepare for battle. Or they would if Akutsuki hadn't called out to them that they had thankfully already found the weapon. He would approach the strange girl, telling her that she had him worried as she knows she's not allowed to leave the lab on her own. He would lead her away, leaving the party with more questions than answers, although the specifics of the weapon would be cleared up that evening. Now that everything is under control, Akutsuki apologizes for all the trouble that went on, although this gives him the opportunity to introduce the team to Aigis. To everyone's surprise, the girl from earlier walks up to them, and without her dress on, her entire body is revealed to actually be mechanical. Aigis was the last of a line of anti-shadow weapons created 10 years ago to fight against the shadows, and now she is the last one that remains intact. As a weapon to combat shadows, Aigis commands the persona Palladion, with her human-like appearance and personality being necessary for her to manifest an artificial psyche. Over the last 10 years, Aigis has been confined to the laboratory on the island after suffering serious combat damage, but for whatever reason she just reactivated herself and escaped. Now that she's operational, Akutsuki intends to bring her onto the team and include her in their mission to end the Dark Hour. Yukari brings up Aigis' strange behavior from earlier as though she seemed to know Makoto, to which Aigis claims that it is very important that she remain by Makoto's side. Akutsuki theorizes it could be her identification system malfunctioning, or perhaps Aigis is still half asleep, but whatever the reason, it's something they'll have to ponder at a later date. The third day of the team's vacation would prove to be their last, and once again, it would be spent at the beach. Despite being up late, Junpei seems to be full of energy, and when the girls arrive, bringing Aigis, the robotic woman asks whether or not they're at the beach for some sort of mission. When Junpei tells her that they're just here for fun, Aigis starts to analyze the situation, as fun is meant to be a refreshment for both mind and body. As Junpei and Aigis head into the water, Fuka ponders whether or not Aigis is even waterproof, but since she seems to be doing fine, they drop the issue. Still, Aigis heads out of the water, although it is to convince everyone else to join in. After all, having fun is most efficient when it is done in the company of other people. As the girls all head into the water with Aigis, Akutsuki walks up and encourages everyone to spend the day relaxing. They already know when the ferry arrives the following day, so until then, the team should simply focus on resting, before they have to focus on their mission once they return. The night everyone returns home, however, Strega would wander around outside of the Dark Hour, approaching Shinjiro at Port Island Station. The others hanging around quickly run off as they approach, and while Takaya wonders why that always happens, he quickly turns his attention towards why they came. Jin hands off a bottle of pills to Shinjiro, and when Shinjiro offers the usual payment, Takaya informs them that this time, they only want information. It seems as though Shinjiro's acquaintances have been particularly busy, especially with their nightly incursions into the so-called Tower of Demise and full moon operations. Takaya inquires as to what they are hoping to accomplish, and when Shinji stays silent, Takaya accuses him of trying to protect his friends. Shinjiro, however, has nothing to do with Seize, and while he doesn't know all the details, he does fill Strega in on what Akihiko told him. Should all 12 of the full moon shadows be defeated, then Tartarus, along with the Dark Hour, will vanish for good. The thought of eliminating the Dark Hour confuses Strega, as who would possibly choose to give up the powers that they had been given? Jin does his best to temper Takaya's outrage, and with the answers they've sought now theirs, the three assassins leave Shinji alone once more. Nothing else of interest happens throughout the night, but before Makoto can be awoken by his alarm, something else wakes him up first. Opening his eyes, Aegis is standing beside his bed and has been all night to ensure that no harm came to him. A knock at the door alerts the two of them to Yukari's presence, as apparently the whole dorm is looking for Aegis after she seemingly disappeared. Aegis would open the door for Yukari to enter, and when asked what she's even doing in Makoto's room, she informs Yukari that she unlocked the door while Makoto was asleep. She wishes to remain in here on standby while they await further orders, much to Yukari's chagrin. That said, Aegis still needs a place to stay, and so Yukari mentions that she'll get a room prepared on the 3rd floor where the other girls are staying. As Yukari wanders off, telling Aegis not to leave the dorm, Aegis takes in the fact that everyone goes to a place called school in the mornings, and follows the orders to stay behind while everyone else leaves. Luckily, she won't need to wait around by herself for long, as summer break would only be a day away. It would be on the final day of school, however, that Strega would visit Shinjiro again during the night, bringing more medication with them. As it seems, the party has included another new member to their team, and regrettably, what Shinjiro told them about ending the Dark Hour seems to be true. As such, they no longer have a choice but to intervene. Each person is allowed to use their gifts as they see fit, but ending the Dark Hour would mean denying that very power. It applies not just to themselves, but also others, and as Strega intends to continue using their powers, that necessarily means that the two groups are now at odds. As Shinjiro tries to walk away, Jin asks him whose side he's on, seeing as Seize has asked Shinjiro a few times now to return to their team. Jin makes it clear, however, that their team is going down and threatens that if Shinji joins them, then he'll be crushed alongside them. The assumptions and begging for him to go back is really starting to piss Shinji off, however, and so he leaves the station while claiming he has nothing to do with Seize's activities. Before the month comes to an end, another crisis would catch the team's attention during the Dark Hour. While monitoring the city, Fuka had detected a shadow and alerted the dorm to assemble in the control room. There, Mitsuru fills them in on the situation, and while it is outside of Tartarus, it's thankfully just a regular shadow. Since Akihiko was already in the area, he went on ahead to take care of it, but Mitsuru would rather have the whole team on standby in case something were to go wrong. It wouldn't be long before Akihiko made contact, asking the team to quickly make their way to the Naganaki Shrine, as the shadow was already defeated when he arrived. It seems, however, that someone was injured during the fight, and so the team quickly rushes over to assess the situation. When they arrive, that someone turns out to be the dog Koromaru, and based on the amount of blood, he's suffered from some serious injuries. Akihiko makes a comment about how Koromaru seems to be one tough fighter, with the implication hanging over them that the dog is somehow a persona user as well. By reading his body language and his barks, Aegis can somewhat understand what Koromaru is trying to communicate, telling everyone that he had done what he had to do to protect this place of peace. It would be then that the party noticed the flower set aside in the memory of the priest that passed away, and it would seem that Koromaru has been acting as the shrine's guardian since his passing. As Fuka and Yukari try their best to stop the bleeding, Mitsuru informs them that she may be able to arrange for a vet to take care of him tonight, assuming Koromaru will be able to hang on. Despite all of the excitement over the month, the team's excursions into Tartarus would not slow down, and ascending to the top of Arca, the pathway opens up to a new block to explore. Where Thebel still vaguely resembles the school and Arca had strange faces peering out from the chitinous walls, Yabasha proves to be stranger still, with stairs built into the sides of walls and rather complicated architecture. There are more dangers that await them in this strange new section of the tower, and yet the team pushes onwards night by night, the Guardians growing ever stronger until more barriers impede their passage until the next full moon. Along with the ascent of Tartarus, Makoto would also seek out other people to hang out with during the day, unlocking new social links from the new clubs opening up before the summer takes hold. The Wheel of Fortune, or simply the Fortune Arcana, is a symbol of change. More specifically, it is a sign of changes outside of our control. It calls to embrace destiny, for better or for worse, as fate is not something one can easily avoid. Even reversed, this message still holds true. The wheel spins endlessly up and down, and we need to learn to let go of our perceptions of control. Things will happen as they may, and so it is sometimes easier to simply embrace destiny rather than to fight it. In order to start the Fortune Social Link, all we need to do is join either the art club, photography club, or music club after June 17th. There, Fuka has already rejoined the club now that the situation with the bullying has been dealt with, and has set us up by talking with the club president, Keisuke Hiraga. However, it doesn't seem he'll be the president for much longer, and when Fuka brings up the fact that he's a senior, Keisuke quickly brushes it off and asks if we can paint. We can start attending the art club when they meet up after this, and as we're leaving one day, Fuka seems to be in a bit of pain. She claims it's only a small headache, but Keisuke starts to fuss over her, saying that whatever it is might lead to complications later if not dealt with now. One of the other club members jokes that Keisuke is playing doctor again, and when we ask about it, we learn a bit more about him. Whenever someone nearby is feeling ill, Keisuke is always the first to jump in to determine how best to help them. Seeing as his father owns one of the nearby hospitals, it is understandable, with the other students convinced he'll likely go to medical school once he graduates. Keisuke determines Fuka's headache is likely the result of stress, and when he offers a more thorough examination, Fuka tells him not to worry as her dorm is nearby and she has us to help her get back home. This piques Keisuke's interest in us, impressed that we take care of ourselves within the dorm. At the next meeting, the club advisor makes an appearance with a rather important announcement. Keisuke had submitted one of his works to a local art contest, and she had come to announce that he had actually made it to the final round. After some congratulations, Keisuke dismisses the achievement as either blind luck or just a result of the technique he used rather than any skill. Yet his dedication is shown through his actions, as Keisuke is always the last to leave and the first to show up. Even when we arrive early to the next meeting, Keisuke is already there, although he seems rather agitated, muttering to himself how he should just quit the art club. When he realizes we're there and heard everything, Keisuke will admit his thoughts of leaving the art club aren't actually his, but his father's. When Keisuke told his father about making it to the finals of the contest, his father scolded him, telling him that art is a waste of time better spent towards his studies. Since Keisuke is his only son, it'll be his responsibility to inherit the hospital, which Keisuke has grown resentful towards. He has his own dreams and goals and has grown displeased that everyone is convinced that he's going to become a doctor like his father, but with a bit of encouragement from us, Keisuke comes up with a plan. He tells us that when he heads home that night, he's going to make a deal with his father. If Keisuke loses the art contest, he'll quit the art club and focus on getting into medical school. But if he wins, then he will want the freedom to follow his own passions. He asks us to keep it a secret for now, however, as he doesn't want to worry the other members about him possibly quitting. It seems as though Keisuke had little to worry about, as at the next meeting, the advisor announces that the judges decided that Keisuke would receive a prize for his work. After more congratulations, Keisuke feels a lot more relieved knowing that he's won the bet with his father. Now he'd be free to walk his own path, and to celebrate his win, the club decides to throw him a party. Before we can go, however, the advisor tells Keisuke there's a few other matters to settle first. Heading over to the faculty office, she tells him that the judges were so impressed that they were actually willing to help pull a few strings so that Keisuke could study abroad after high school. Before he can really react, another student rushes up, telling him that she needs his help as one of her friends has fainted. Keisuke tells the advisor that he'll take some time to think about the offer and rushes off, prompting the advisor to think over his situation. Despite not wanting to be a doctor, he's always willing to help those in need. Everything that has happened lately has been weighing heavily on Keisuke's mind, and so he'll ask to meet with us after the next club meeting. Catching up with him in private, he'll inform us that he told his father about the offer to study abroad. Surprisingly, his father actually encouraged him to pursue his passion, when earlier he had been telling Keisuke to quit the art club, leaving him confused on what he should do. If he leaves now, it would be as though Keisuke is only going to study art because his father told him that he could. He feels a little better after talking with us, but still leaves feeling conflicted. After taking some time to think it over, Keisuke calls us back to the roof to talk again, though this time it's more of a rant. Keisuke's father hasn't given him any say in the situation, and has even begun to plan out where Keisuke will study, which dorm he'll live in, and even which flight he'll take to get there. While studying abroad would be a great opportunity, he would be closing other doors that are open to him, and leaving behind his friends and the people that have been supportive of him. He apologizes, since it seems all he ever does now is complain to us, and admits that now, he's even less sure of what he wants to do with his life. The only hope he has left is to look to the heavens, letting his destiny come to him as it may. Regardless of fate, Keisuke still has a choice that he needs to make, and when the two of us stay behind to clean up the art room, he asks us to take a break to confide in us. Keisuke has decided to accept the offer to study abroad, but at this point, he's not even all that excited about the opportunity. With that out of the way, he heads to go grab some drinks at the vending machine before resuming our cleaning duties. When he returns, he's too late to warn us as a box falls off the shelf onto our head, knocking us out. When we wake up again, we're resting in the nurse's office with Keisuke standing next to our bed. Relieved to see that we're awake, he starts to assess us, checking for signs of a concussion. He feels especially guilty because he was the one to put the box on the shelf, and when he rushed us to the nurse's office, he kept thinking about what would happen if we didn't wake back up. When Keisuke's father was young, he had been playing with a friend of his. One moment, his friend was fine, and the next, he had fainted. By the time help had arrived, his friend had already passed away, and now, Keisuke understands how his father must have felt in that moment, being powerless to save someone he cared about. It leaves him feeling more conflicted than ever, but still resolute he doesn't want to follow his father's plan for him. Despite having come to an answer, the choice still weighs heavily upon him. So heavy that Keisuke asks us to leave with him in the middle of a club meeting, taking us to Port Island Station to say his goodbyes. Until he can find the answer for himself, Keisuke's decided he won't return to either his home or school, stealing his father's credit card to help him get by. When he goes to leave, however, an old woman nearby lets out a few coughs before collapsing. Checking her over, Keisuke finds that she's having trouble breathing and has a fever, and checking through her purse, he finds a pack of cigarettes. Suggesting she may be suffering from bronchitis and caught a cold, he has us call an ambulance to take her to the hospital. Once the situation is handled, Keisuke goes to leave again, only for an old man to grab onto his chest and collapse. As he starts to go help him, he realizes his train is about to leave. We reassure Keisuke that we can handle the situation as he runs off to alert an attendant to call an ambulance, but our attempts at first aid are less than helpful, doing more harm than good. When Keisuke returns, he finds the man in the middle of having a heart attack, and with the situation as dire as it is, he'll likely die before help can arrive. Rather than catching his train, Keisuke asks us for our help to perform CPR until the paramedics can arrive. Once the old man has been taken away, Keisuke seems happier than he's been in a while. We had managed to save 2 people, and with that feeling in his heart, he decides to head back home for now. The next art club meeting would prove to be Keisuke's last, as in the middle of the session he makes the announcement that he's decided to quit. The other members are shocked from the sudden change, but Keisuke informs them that he'll be using the extra time to study for entrance exams to enter medical school. Meeting with him one last time atop the school roof, Keisuke gifts us with the award letter from the contest. He had only received an honorable mention, coming in at 4th place, making him realize that he still has a lot to learn. Ever since the events at the station, Keisuke has been doing a lot of thinking, admitting that we mean a great deal to him. The 2 elderly people also have people that are important to them, and if the 2 of us hadn't been there, then those people never would have been able to see them again. That's what convinced Keisuke to become a doctor, even if it left him feeling like he ran in one big circle. Now, however, Keisuke is becoming a doctor not because that's what his father wants, but because that's what he wants for himself. He even goes so far as to proclaim that so long as he lives, he will make sure nothing bad will happen to us. Concerned about our health, making sure we're getting a proper nutritious diet, Keisuke walks us home, stopping on the way to grab a healthy meal and granting us the ability to fuse Norn, the 3 sisters that control fate within Nordic myth. Despite a few unbelievable situations, I do like Keisuke's story. It does come full circle with him on the path to being a doctor at the start and at the end, but the point isn't so much where he's going, but instead why he's walking that road. It's this that connects Keisuke back to the Wheel of Fortune Arcana, as he initially starts his journey by resisting fate, for the sole reason that it was placed upon him at all. Through both his father and his peers, Keisuke feels as though he doesn't have the room to pursue what he wants to do on his own. Even when his father agrees to let Keisuke study abroad, it only worsens his confusion on what he wants to do with his life, due to his father seemingly taking over and directing that dream for him. When even that failed, Keisuke attempted to run away as one last-ditch effort to take back control, but as fortune tells us, sometimes we need to learn to accept where our story leads. While it may be a bit unbelievable that 2 people would fall ill as he tried to leave, it could have been fate's way of helping Keisuke find the answers he was looking for on his own. It gave him the opportunity to accept his destiny on his own terms, pursuing medicine for his own personal reasons rather than having it thrust upon him by his father. Really, I believe that was all Keisuke was searching for. The art club was just a way for him to defy his father's plans for him and feel as though he had any amount of control over his own future. But even from the beginning, he had the makings of a doctor in him. Not because he is his father's son, but because Keisuke himself had the desire to help people and only needed to see that within himself to accept that that was what destiny had planned for him.
Just as one must trust fate to guide them down the right path, they must also trust their intuitions. This is the message of the High Priestess Arcana, which symbolizes inward reflection and connecting with one's spiritual side. In that way, it serves as a sort of inverse of the magician's more action-oriented drive, and its reversal is characterized by confusion and ignoring one's own intuitions. Sometimes this will manifest as one's actions clashing with their sense of morality, but can also be a byproduct of other factors such as anxiety or self-doubt. Fuka Yamagishi is the first member of the party whose social link we can unlock once we have started Keisuke's social link, and is the representation of the High Priestess. While Fuka's story overall is also a reflection of the High Priestess, for the moment, I'll instead just be covering her social link and how it connects back to her Arcana. Despite being unlocked early, Fuka's social link is actually a little more difficult to start, as it will require us to fully max out our courage stat. When we talk to her about the idea of hanging out, Fuka will ask if we would be able to try tasting some of the food she made for lunch. It gives us a bit of a bad feeling, but with enough courage, we can agree. Meeting with her on top of the school, Fuka encourages us to have just a bite, and when we try it, the food is very unappetizing. We give her our opinion of how bad it is, either saying it straight out or doing our best to be encouraging, and Fuka apologizes for making us try out her food. However, we're the only person she knows that we'll be honest with her about it, and as such, values our opinion. With that, we agree to try out her food again at a later point, and when we get the chance, it does look somewhat better than the first meal. Before we get the chance to try it, a cat walks over meowing for some food, and Fuka decides to offer it some to eat. When it sniffs the food, however, it immediately runs away, and now feeling unsure about it, Fuka tries some herself. The food is still pretty awful, so Fuka will take it back from us, not wanting to make us sick. The reason she's trying to get better at cooking is because she wants to be useful to the team both in Tartarus and outside of the Dark Hour, and thought that homemade lunches would be a good way of doing that. Before that though, she'll actually need to learn how to cook, and looks to us for help. Since then, Fuka has been practicing over and over, but hasn't seemed to have gotten anywhere. As the two of us pass through Iwatodai Station, Fuka admits that she always imagines the worst case scenarios and has a hard time thinking positively. However, the other SEAS members have all been so encouraging, helping inspire her to keep moving forward. She considers watching a cooking show or getting a cookbook from the library, but the school library doesn't have any such books and the shows would likely be too advanced. When we suggest getting a cookbook from the bookstore, Fuka admits to having had a bad experience at such a store earlier that year. All of the cooking means she needs to go out regularly to get more groceries, and so when we accompany Fuka to Polonia Mall, we can see some of the things that she's been using for her food. After buying spices at the pharmacy, Fuka admits that it's likely not the way she's cooking the food, but her mindset that's souring it. When she cooks, she thinks to herself that it's not going to turn out well and wishes there was something she was good at. When we ask if there is anything, she does admit she's proficient with electronics. Her father used to tinker with audio equipment, and so Fuka picked up the habit from him. But it wouldn't be very useful to the team, especially with the Kirijo group supplying them with what they need, and since it isn't a very feminine hobby, Fuka has mostly kept that to herself. The next time Fuka has something ready for us to try, she's confident we'll be able to eat it. When she hands it over, it's simply a flavored rice ball, and surprisingly, it's not only edible, but actually tastes good. She learned how to make them in home economics, and since then, she's just been practicing making them each night. When she's with us, Fuka can think a bit more positively and tells us that when she was making the rice balls, she was concentrating on who was going to eat them rather than her lack of skills.
To Fuka, however, rice balls won't be enough to thank everyone for how much they've helped her, and so she keeps moving forward with improving her cooking skills. She's intent to learn new recipes, asking us to help her taste test just a little while longer. When Fuka is feeling confident enough, we can accompany her to go into the bookstore at Iwatodai Station to look for any cookbooks. Unfortunately, however, none seem to be available, and Fuka apologizes as we leave for wasting our time. Reminded of the event that happened earlier this year, she also fills us in on what happened. Back in April, Fuka had tried to reach a book on a high shelf, accidentally knocking some over. When a few fell into her bag and she tried to put them back, a girl came up to confront her. She had taken a picture of Fuka with the books in her bag, threatening to tell her parents that she's a thief. At the time, her negative thoughts kept her from standing up for herself, and now Fuka's confident that if we are by her side, then she could find the strength to do so. Our presence has been having a positive effect on her, and one day, when Fuka calls us up to meet on the roof of the school, she lets us in on what she's been thinking about lately. Nobody can truly predict the future, and things will come as they may. All we can do is look towards it and believe that fortune will smile upon us. She admits that she's not quite at that level of positive thinking yet, but she is starting to change. At first, she was worried that once she paid back the rest of the team for their help, the two of us wouldn't have any more reason to hang out. Now she sees that was a rather silly thought, as the two of us are friends through and through. Meeting up with her again, Fuka lets us know how her efforts have been going, after giving Yukari some rice balls. Apparently, she liked them so much that she ate a few more, and when Fuka mentioned that these were a thank you for all that the team had done, Yukari sat there confused. When Fuka told her everything that she had told us, Yukari started laughing, letting her know that friends don't owe each other anything other than their friendship. Her old negative thoughts started creeping in, worried people wouldn't like her if they saw the real her, until Fuka had a revelation. It wasn't so much that she wanted to thank everyone for their kindness they had shown her, but instead, she wanted to support everyone and help them in whatever ways she could. Her feelings weren't as complicated as she first thought, and it's helped her see herself for who she truly is. When she invites us to her room for our last hangout, Fuka apologizes for the state of it. She usually likes to eat alone here, and so she's become a bit blind to the smell of food that permeates the air. Realizing she's babbling a bit, she steers the conversation towards the real reason she wanted to talk to us. Originally, Fuka couldn't think positively about the future, but her time with us has taught her the reason was because she never finished anything she started. There was never any point to finishing things if there's no future to look forward to, but that mindset changed little by little as Fuka hung out with us. To show her appreciation, she gifts us with a set of headphones she had been tinkering with, which work much better than our old ones. Fuka confesses that she's given up on her desire to learn how to cook, and instead just wants to try to be herself. It's not a very feminine trait to be good with electronics in Fuka's eyes, but her skills are rather extraordinary, and in time she'll learn to let go of those doubts. As we spend the evening talking with Fuka, we earn the ability to fuse the legendary warrior and teacher Skathic. While I am not the biggest fan of the whole girl is bad at doing historically feminine tasks storylines, I can see what this one was trying to do and why the skill of cooking was chosen, even if the ultimate reasoning is a little weak. Fuka's story during her social link is meant to illustrate her growing confidence that emerges throughout the game and learning to let go of her self-doubts. It was these anxieties that led Fuka to believe that she wasn't doing enough for her friends, and that her interests aren't correct for her place in society. It ties Fuka to the reversed High Priestess, with her doubts holding her back from being true to herself, but by giving her the opportunity to explore these insecurities, we help Fuka better understand them. Most of Fuka's revelations don't really come from outside forces, but instead from looking in at herself. And when she's ready to verbalize her thoughts, we are there to help her work through her complicated feelings. At her core, Fuka just wants to help out the people around her, but seeing her natural skills with electronics as useless due to the presence of the Kirijo group and her perception it isn't feminine enough, she instead turned to trying to learn a skill she wasn't great at to begin with. What would have worked better, in my opinion, would be if we saw Fuka learn to be confident in her tinkering skills, rather than spend the majority of the time focused on her cooking. perhaps if we started off with Fuka attempting to fix something, only for her negative thoughts to cause her to accidentally break it, and as her mindset starts to change, the quality of her repair starts to increase. We really only get to see her choosing to focus on what she's good at in the last hangout of the social link, with no real build-up to that point, besides a single mention previously of her affinity for electronics. As is, Fuka's social link is fine. It's not the worst of the 4 social links we have with the main party, but I do wish the focus was a little more on the gaining of confidence in something she's good at, rather than trying to get better at something she's bad at. Something amusing to note, however, is Fuka's story about accidentally knocking over some books in a bookstore, as we can actually see this happen in the opening montage of the first movie. And wait a minute, one detail of this story sounds awfully familiar.
So, I pretended to take a picture with my cell phone. And? She freaked out and started crying. Like it was the end of the world. You should have seen the look on her face. It was priceless.
Oh my god!
I have never laughed so hard in all my life.
It really should come as no surprise that Natsuki was the one that took Fuka's picture in the bookstore, and it is entirely likely that this is when her and her friends started to bully Fuka. I like that we get to see both sides of the story, which only paints Natsuki in a worse light when viewed from Fuka's perspective. I also think it shows a great amount of strength on Fuka's part that she not only forgave Natsuki, but also decided to befriend her, as I don't know many people who would choose to do something like that. While still on the topic of Fuka, we can also take a look at her persona, Lucia, or as she was more commonly known, Saint Lucy. Lucia was a noblewoman born in the city of Syracuse around the end of the 3rd century, and it would not take long for tragedy to strike her. After her father passed away when she was 5, Lucia was left with only the care of her mother, who began to fear for the future of her daughter. Hoping to secure her a place in the world, Lucia's mother would promise her hand in marriage to another family, which would cause a number of issues. Lucia was not interested in marriage and instead looked to the Virgin Saint Agatha as inspiration. She would vow to remain a virgin as Saint Agatha had done, and when she began to distribute her wealth among the poor, her betrothed grew furious. In order to force Lucia to break her vows, her betrothed reported her to the Roman authorities during a time of Christian prosecution. Lucia was sentenced to forced prostitution to take her virginity from her and break her vow to God, but when the Romans came to drag her into a brothel, it was said that she was saved by divine intervention. No matter how hard the authorities attempted to move Lucia, she had become fixed in place. Even a team of oxen strapped to her would prove ineffective, and so the Romans turned to alternative methods to force her to move. They piled wood around Lucia, intending to build a pyre to burn her at the stake, but once more their attempts were thwarted. Lucia stood untouched by the fire and began to speak of the retribution that would not only befall the governor that had condemned her, but that the reign of the emperor would prove to be short-lived. For these threats, Lucia's eyes were gouged out, and it wasn't until a blade slid through her throat that she was silenced forevermore. Yet, when the body was taken to the family mausoleum and prepared for burial, those in attendance were shocked to find that her eyes had been miraculously restored. By the 6th century, the story of Lucia would become more widespread, and she would become the patron saint of her home city of Syracuse, as well as the patron saint of the blind. The clear tie to the persona, then, is Lucia's connection with eyes. The design of the persona itself has its eyes wrapped in bandages where Lucia's eyes were gouged out, along with around her throat, but the defining feature is the large glass orb starting below the hips. With the metallic casing surrounding it, supporting the bottom half of the dress, the orb almost looks like a large eye, and this connection is what gives Fuka her powers of surveillance. Even without direct eyesight, Fuka is able to help navigate the party throughout Tartarus, and locate any large shadows during each full moon. Not only this, but she's able to communicate with others despite the vast distances of the tower, while still remaining on the ground floor. Both Lucia's sight and voice were taken from her in the story of her martyrdom, and yet it is these two abilities that Fuka can manifest from afar. The bullying Fuka faces at the hands of her classmates may also be seen as an allegory for the persecution that St. Lucia faced at the hands of the Romans. It seems, however, that the reason Natsuki and the other girls picked on Fuka was because she was timid and easily frightened, with their ultimate sentence then mirroring Lucia's. Where Lucia was sentenced to prostitution for wanting to maintain her virginity, Fuka would be locked within the confines of the gym, alone and in the dark, in an effort to further scare her. However, rather than breaking her, it would be within the school that Fuka found her own divine intervention. With the awakening of her persona, Fuka could easily locate and avoid the shadows wandering the halls of Tartarus, until eventually being saved by the members of SEAS, and ultimately becoming their protector and guide. It's also rather interesting to note that when Fuka first used her persona to protect Natsuki, the Empress's shadow was unable to penetrate its protective dome. Here, Lucia held strong, unmovable, but it was not done so in the defiance of an unjust persecution, but instead to protect an innocent life caught up in forces beyond her knowledge. Fuka isn't the only one with a rather interesting persona, as Aigis is arguably more so. A lot of this stems from the concept of a robot possessing enough of a psyche that it can manifest itself as a persona, but the form that the persona takes is also rather telling. While the personas of other characters are beings of myth and history, they are all of them, at the very least, some kind of living person or monster. The exception to this is Aigis, whose persona Palladion isn't a person, but instead was a statue that was constructed in the image of the goddess Athena, just as Aigis herself is a robot constructed in the image of mankind. The statue itself is also the subject of a number of legends, although they mainly relate to its theft across the centuries. To me, the importance of this persona isn't so much the ties to the story of what happened to the Palladion statue, but instead what the statue represented to the people who venerated it. As a statue of Pallas Athena, Palladion was a symbol of safety and protection, as though the goddess of wisdom and war herself would protect whichever city held on to it. One statue resided within the Acropolis in Athens, but the more famous incarnation was constructed during the founding of Troy, which would play a hand in the city's downfall. During the events of the Trojan War, the city's prince and seer Helenus was abducted by the legendary hero Odysseus. From him, they would learn not only of the statue's existence, but also its importance to the morale of the citizens. Odysseus and Diomedes would sneak into Troy through a secret passage, absconding with the statue and leaving the city to be left vulnerable to deception by the Greeks, as they were brought the gift of a large wooden horse. Much like the Palladion statue, Aigis serves as a guardian for the other members of SEAS and for Makoto, thinking of herself as merely a tool to defeat shadows. Unlike other personas that are mobile and flexible, Palladion is entirely stiff, maintaining a static and rigid pose. The movement comes in through the series of shifting parts along its head, which reveal a large piece of machinery used as a lance. The rigidity speaks towards Aigis' personality, as while Palladion was built in the image of Athena in the same way Aigis was built in the image of a human, the facade is easily broken when Aigis starts to interact with people. She is just as rigid in her thinking and her speech, her monotone voice devoid of emotion. Aigis approaches everything in black and white, with her frequently interpreting whatever they are doing as some sort of new mission, or as a way to further the team's ultimate goals of ending the Dark Hour. It's one would expect from a robotic character, although it means there is a distinct emotional barrier between her and the rest of the team. Yet her presence on the battlefield helps her stand out from the crowd, eliminating shadows with emotionless efficiency. It almost makes it seem as though the team's guardian uses a good offense as their defense, which is even more clear with a special Orgia mode. During Orgia mode, Aigis breaks the limits of her hardware, increasing the amount of damage that she deals while making her uncontrollable during combat, executing a full assault against the team's enemies. It's not something that can last forever though, and after a few turns, Aigis will be stunned for a turn due to overheating. Still, seeing as Aigis serves as the protector to Makoto, the story of the Trojan War should not be tossed aside so easily, as it serves as a warning. Should Aigis ever be stolen away from the party, they will all be left in great danger. Pharos' arrival heralds another full moon within a week's time, reminding Makoto about the upcoming ordeal. This time, however, the looming fight is a little different from the previous ones, with a hidden threat ready to make their move. That week passes by in the blink of an eye, and the team assembles within the control room to see if they can't locate whatever shadow was crawling around the city this time. According to Fuka, she managed to detect the shadow in northern Iwatodai, but strangely enough, it seems to be underground somewhere. Yukari suggests that it could be in a basement of some kind, and Aigis interjects that, according to her records, there used to be an old facility in that area used by the military. Before she went offline, Aigis had a lot of architectural and geographic information uploaded into her memory. Seeing as the last time those were updated was 10 years ago, however, there's no way to tell if that military base is still there without going there and checking. And since there isn't much point in standing around talking about it, the party heads to the location to find the underground base. As it turns out, the facility is still intact, and the party manages to gain entry through the nearby harbor. As they stand there, looking down the tunnel for any signs of the shadow, a voice calls out through the gloom behind them. Through the darkness, Jin and Takaya would emerge, catching even Fuka off guard as she wasn't able to detect their presence. They introduce themselves as Strega, with Takaya commending the group for having taken on such a responsibility to save the world, and yet they have come here to put an end to that plan. When asked why the two of them would possibly want to stop Seas from ending the Dark Hour, the answer is as simple as them not wanting to relinquish their powers. Mitsuru catches on at the implication that Jin and Takaya are Persona users as well, and Takaya explains that these powers they all share allow them to be the pioneers of a new frontier. The Dark Hour and the Tower of Demise is for them alone to explore, and since people die every day, the cost of human life preyed upon by shadows is but a small price to pay. As one last try to convince the group to his side, Takaya asks them to simply acknowledge the sense of purpose the Dark Hour has given to them, questioning whether they truly wish to return to their mediocre lives. It gives pause to Junpei and Akihiko, but when Yukari and Fuka affirm that they want no part in the Dark Hour, Jin points out that justice is a meaningless excuse to fight. They each have their own selfish reasons to end the Dark Hour, and since that conflicts with Strega's reasons for keeping the Dark Hour around, one party has to lose out. As the two head back the way they came, Jin kicks a mechanism, causing the doors to close behind them, trapping the Sea's members inside the tunnel. Rather than wasting energy trying to get the door open, however, Aigis suggests that they deal with the shadow first, which poses the largest threat at the moment as Fuka senses that it's begun to move through the facility, likely having sensed the commotion. As the party gives chase, the facility seems to have once been a weapons storage depot for the World War, with all sorts of artillery and supplies littered around the compound. But one piece of equipment to take note of is a large tank stored there. Although the party doesn't see it as they press onwards, the tread marks on the floor indicate that there's at least one within the facility, and in all likelihood, the shadow has possessed it. Chasing the shadow into a dead end, it seems as though their initial hunch was correct, as the shadow is using the tank as some sort of armor, and as the turret swivels around, the shadow readies its attack. This shadow is the inverse representative for the Justice Arcana, or maybe it's the Chariot. According to Fuka, she can sense both Arcanas coming from the creature, and the trick is only revealed as the fight drags on. After a few rounds, the turret opens up and the shadow on top pops off, with the tank itself standing up to reveal the mask underneath. It's not one shadow with two different Arcana, but instead two different shadows that combine into one to make the most of their strength. The small angelic shadow with the machine gun is actually the inverse Justice, while the living tank is the Chariot. The Chariot is a symbol of victory, embodying willpower, ambition, and knowing when and how to regulate oneself to push through the odds. The card itself is shown to be a man riding atop a chariot, pulled along by a black and a white sphinx, and while that doesn't initially come across in the Shadow's design, it seems the tank is serving as the spiritual stand-in for the chariot. Both are symbols of the military used as vehicles for warfare, and where the chariot was a terror of the ancient world, the modern equivalent of such a vehicle would be the tanks used during the First and Second World War. Although it may seem the earlier conclusion was wrong, with the tank actually being a shadow, it seems upon closer inspection that it isn't actually the case. The shell of the chariot is a possessed tank, repurposed and altered into its current configuration, as the real body is flattened and hidden on the bottom of the vehicle. Not only is that where the mask is located, but there's also a distinctive rigid shape looking bolted underneath it, with a pair of arms folded over its chest. While it would be fair to say that the chariot is the one operating the tank, this is still the reverse chariot we're dealing with, and those thoughts of drive and ambition are inverted. On its own, the chariot moves in a rigid motion with no real joints with the exception of where the treads connect to the hull, almost slowing it down or impairing its movement. A reverse chariot indicates a lack of direction or control, and the reason this shadow cannot handle both of those concepts is likely because of where it's chosen to hide itself. Since the shadow's face is stuck to the bottom of the tank, that means it would need to stand upright in order to see where it's going, restricting it to awkwardly walking on its treads. It could use those treads to properly roll itself around, likely moving much faster and smoother in the process, but its vision would be restricted to the floor, and would be unable to see where exactly it's going. Thus, the only solution to its problem is to give up on any drive of its own and hand over the reins to some other entity, which in this case is its partnered shadow. This chariot is just a tool for the Justice to use, commanding it and directing it as it sees fit, and it's more than a little ironic that the shadow gains full control over the possessed body only when it gives up total control over its own independent thought. The Justice, then, is the main brains behind the two shadows, and its design almost makes it look like a small angel or cherub dressed up in knight's armor. The halo behind the head and the mechanical wings help to give it a feeling of divinity, and the armor gives the implication that this shadow is the embodiment of a merciless divine punishment. This stands in opposition to the Arcana itself, as Justice is supposed to be the Arcana of equality, accountability, and karma. The law is supposed to be both just and fair to all those involved, with people receiving the appropriate punishment for their actions. Consequences are measured off by the severity of the crimes committed, with compensation delivered to those that have been affected, and the call for harsher punishments are better saved for far more serious offenses. And yet, this tiny metal angel wields a large machine gun, which, although it can be directed in a general direction, will shoot down any caught in the crossfire. It doesn't matter whether or not you are affiliated with its target or not, as the rain of bullets will hit anyone too close to the intended target. With it being an angelic knight, it could also be seen that besides divine retribution, this shadow carries out the verdict of some sort of corrupt king, and without any scales to balance out its reasoning, the sentence is always death. The angelic form then would merely be a facade to call its justice as righteous, as the halo and wings are more or less just a part of the armor. The halo was simply attached to the back of the helmet, while the wings are a mockery made of metal. If this shadow isn't the pawn of some greater force, however, then it would be carrying out its judgment based on its own twisted sense of morality, using the chariot as the podium from which it casts down divine retribution. The chariot shields the main body of the Justice while combined, allowing it to safely fire upon those it deems unworthy, and guiding those beneath it as a divine ruler. The gimmick, as already shown, is how the chariot and Justice will join together and split apart every few rounds throughout the fight, forcing the player to alternate between fighting multiple opponents and burning down a single target. While combined, the shadows have a limited moveset, mainly attacking or inflicting panic or poison, with the chariot and Justice having a much more varied set of attacks when split. The chariot will focus more on inflicting status ailments or delivering powerful swings, while the Justice will deal steady damage each round, occasionally going in for an instant kill attack if it lands. What the two shadows have in common, however, is access to the ability Sama Rekarm, which will revive the partnered shadow with full health. This presents a bit of a challenge when trying to defeat the two of them, as they need to be defeated together. If one is brought down and the other is left alive, they will simply revive their fallen comrade and carry on. While one could try to focus one down, then the other, the fusion makes this endeavor a bit more difficult. This is because when the two shadows fuse together, they share the same health pool, and when they split apart, both shadows are given equal amounts of health. Instead, it is far more efficient to burn them down together than one at a time. If the player manages to reduce the health of the combined form to 0, then the two shadows will simply split apart with 1 health each, allowing for a swift and simple execution. Back at the dorm, Akutsuki receives a call from Mitsuru about the mission's success, and when he wishes the team a safe trip back to the dorm, Mitsuru lets him in on their current predicament. 2 Persona users manage to intercept them, trapping them inside the facility, and more troubling, they seem to be aware of the group's nightly activities. Ikutsuki agrees to see what he can find out about this Strega, letting Mitsuru know he'll send someone over to let them out. They aren't the only ones active during the dark hour, and with the ordeal having been handled, Pharos returns to Makoto's room a few nights later. With each passing month, he remembers just a little bit more, and this time he's come to say that the fall won't be the fault of any one person in particular. It will arrive simply because there are many people who wish for it to come. It's a curious thought why anyone would want it to happen, but Pharos assumes some people may wish for death over suffering. However, Pharos pushes that thought aside for the moment, not wanting to be distracted by the real reason he came tonight. He has come to deliver a warning of a poisonous flower blooming among the members of Seas, just as 3 others bloom in the opposing garden. Pharos warns that Makoto should be careful in the coming months, and that he'll be back if he remembers anything useful. After all the excitement, the path forward through Tartarus now lies open, and before the group can enjoy their summer vacation, Mitsuru asks everyone to gather for a meeting one evening. Rather than informing everyone about a new mission, however, Mitsuru wishes to introduce everyone to a new member of the team. Having recovered from his injuries, Koromaru will become a part of Seas, and the fancy new collar around him is actually a specialized evoker made specifically for dogs to use. As such, Koromaru will be living in the dorm from now on, so it will be everyone's responsibility to care for him and take him for nightly walks. When Yukari asks whether Koromaru even wants to fight in the first place, he speaks through Aigus, assuring the team that he wants to return the favor for saving his life. With the meeting adjourned, Mitsuru encourages people to enjoy their summer break while they can, as they will all be attending summer school the following week. It gets a laugh from Junpei until Mitsuru informs him that she already signed everyone up for intensive classes, as she feels rather sorry their nightly excursions have reduced the time everyone has had to tend to their academic responsibilities. Mitsuru told Yukari and Fuka about the scheduling, but since the 2 of them forgot to let everyone else in, it comes as a surprise to Junpei and Makoto. As much as they dislike it, it does provide a bit of normalcy, especially after the weight of last month's revelations, and the knowledge of Strega watching their activities during the dark hour. Thankfully, the classes don't take too long to get through, and by the end of it all, Makoto gets the opportunity to hang out with social links outside of their usual setting. One of the romanceable options can be invited to the summer festival at the Naganaki Shrine, where they'll have the chance to eat some takoyaki and play in a draw. While that festival only lasts for a day, the movie festival at the Port Island Station Theater runs through the rest of the summer, with each day allowing Makoto to hang out with both friends from school as well as the other members of Seas. It all adds to the slice of life simulator aspect, providing a bit of reprieve before moving towards the heaviness of the game's second half. By the time August 20th rolls around, summer break is nearly over, and while there isn't much time left to be free of school responsibilities, Junpei is left to wander around Port Island Station feeling rather bored. That is, until he notices a girl sitting nearby, dressed in a doll-like outfit. When he approaches her, the girl tells him to get out of the way of her drawing, to which he just moves over to the side. Seeing as Junpei still hasn't left, she asks him what it is that he wants, and without any real reason to stick around, he walks away, questioning both her attire and the strange drawings. Ken would also be doing his best to make use of the last of summer break, but when he leaves one of the shops at Iwatodai Station, some voices from below catch his attention. Once again, Akihiko is pushing for Shinjiro to rejoin the team, even mentioning how their latest recruit against the Shadows isn't even human. Before that, Koromaru had been protecting the Naganaki Shrine from shadows, loyally guarding it despite the bad memories of what happened there. The bad memories that's keeping Shinjiro off the team was witnessing someone die right in front of his eyes 2 years ago. Despite Akihiko also being there to witness it, he's kept looking forward, while Shinji just hangs out behind Port Island Station, feeling sorry for himself. That's because, unlike what happened to Akihiko's sister Miki, the death that happened on that day was directly their fault, and that's something Shinji cannot forgive himself for. As Shinjiro walks away, Ken starts to connect a few of the pieces together in his head, now learning the name of the older stranger. It would only be a few days later that Ikutsuki would call another meeting together, with the announcement that Ken would be officially joining Seas. After running numerous tests, Ken is capable of summoning a persona as well, and can join in the fight, to which both Akihiko and Mitsuru step in to question the decision. Ken is still in elementary school, and likely isn't ready to tackle the harsh realities of the Dark Hour, and when asked whether or not Ken was even on board with joining the fight, Ken states that he had actually come to Ikutsuki to volunteer, rather than the other way around. Despite the misgivings of the two seniors, Junpei steps up to welcome Ken onto the team, promising to watch his back while out in the field. As August reaches its close, summer break is also coming to a swift end, and with it, the start of the second semester of school approaches. It leaves Junpei thinking about his future, if only for a moment, before he notices the same strange girl sitting by the train station again. As he approaches her, she seems to recognize him as well, and the two find it surprising that the other even remembered them. Junpei tries to make a bit of small talk, only to get short replies back, and even praises the girl for having something she seems to be pretty into. As he heads on his way, he calls back towards her, saying that whenever she's finished with her sketch, he'd like to stop by and see it. It doesn't elicit a verbal response, but the girl does stop to glance over at Junpei before carrying on with her work. It's a promise that Junpei would try to keep, as on the last day of August he would visit the girl one more time. He does his best to try and play off their third meeting as just coincidence, and introduces himself properly. The girl remains as distant as ever, even getting ready to leave, until Junpei notices her hand is bleeding. He starts fussing over her, trying to think of ways to stop the bleeding, to which the girl asks Junpei why he can't just mind his own business and leave her alone. When Junpei suggests taking her to the doctor, the girl brushes him off one final time and starts to walk away. Before she leaves, however, she stops for a moment to tell Junpei that her name is Chidori. She lets him know that she's almost finished working on the drawing, and that if he wants to come back and see it, he'll know where to find her. With that, the two part ways, leaving an unspoken agreement to meet again soon. During the summer, we're locked out of the social links that are available through the school, and so if we want to advance through more of them, we'll have to look elsewhere. Luckily, there are a number of social links we can encounter around Iwatodai, the first of which is the Hierophant. The Hierophant Arcana serves as a sort of mentor, passing on the wisdom that it has accumulated over its life to the next generation. It is the Arcana of tradition, education, and community. It is through tradition that it can become an Arcana of conformity, and thus its reverse is one of rigidity. Through a strict adherence to what has come before, the reversed Hierophant is a warning of the constraint and stagnation that can accompany holding on to what is established, and encouraging people to break free from it. Starting April 25th, we can overhear a few students talking about the used bookstore over at Iwatodai Station, allowing us to check in after that. If we go to the store, an elderly couple will greet us from behind the counter, with the elderly man joking about the fresh mackerel that they sell. Noting our school uniform, he'll ask if we've ever seen the persimmon tree planted at Gekukon, and when we express our confusion, he points us towards the courtyard leading to the sports clubs. For us to actually start the social link, we'll need to poke around the school until we find the tree, taking a leaf from it as proof that we saw it. If we go back to the bookstore, leaf in hand, the man will take notice of it and ask to look it over. The two will be touched that we didn't come here to buy any books, but instead to show them the leaf, and praise us for our kindness. They had been meaning to visit the tree for a while now, but their age has made the trip to the school rather difficult. The man will introduce himself as Bunkichi and his wife as Mitsuko, inviting us to visit again should we ever have the time. When we do come back, they'll be a little surprised to see us again, with Bunkichi pretending he's already forgotten our name. He'll offer us a few melon bread, seeing as they have a few too many, and whether we accept or decline, he'll praise us for our kindness, unlike a certain someone. Bunkichi will ask Mitsuko where that someone is, as he should be here to help with the customers, and upon asking who he's talking about, Bunkichi will mention their son. Bunkichi's fussing only seems to sadden Mitsuko, however, until he remembers that their son passed away some time ago. His forgetfulness casts a gloomy hold over the store, so Bunkichi attempts to lighten the mood before sending us on our way. When we come for another visit, the two of them are rummaging around the store, looking for Bunkichi's wallet. When they find it, however, Mitsuko is horrified to see Bunkichi pull out a set of keys to a car. She pleads with him not to get into a car as she doesn't want to end up all alone, and if we ask what's so bad about driving, Bunkichi will bring up the death of their son. On his way home from work one evening, their son was hit by a drunk driver, and realizing how insensitive he was being, Bunkichi feels guilty for worrying his wife. As an apology, he decides to take her out to dinner instead, to somewhere within walking distance. The next time we stop by, Mitsuko is nowhere to be seen, and according to Bunkichi, she went out for a walk to visit Gekkoukan. She's likely to be back relatively soon, so Bunkichi asks us to keep him company until she returns. When she does step in, however, it seems as though something has upset her. The two of them had heard a rumor that the school was planning on chopping down the persimmon tree, and so she went to visit it one more time. They had tried looking into the rumors, but so far haven't been able to find any answers, and so Mitsuko asks us to keep an ear out so long as it's not too much trouble. It's a request they'll apologize for the next time we see them, as they feel guilty for troubling us. As it turns out, their son was a teacher at Gekkoukan before the accident, and that persimmon tree was planted by him and the first class that he taught on their graduation day. Now it stands as a memorial to him, and just before it was about to start bearing fruit, the school was planning to tear it down. Our next visit is just as dour, with Bunkichi attempting to cheer up Mitsuko. Word has gotten back to them that the school has confirmed their plans on chopping down the persimmon tree, and with it, erased the memory of their son. The two went to the school to visit the tree, but it only further reminded Mitsuko of their son's death, upsetting her more than before. With our help, Bunkichi brings a smile back to Mitsuko's face and hands over some fried bread as a thanks for our company. Although it initially seems as though our help was temporary, with Mitsuko crying the next time we come into the store, Bunkichi assures us they're actually tears of happiness. A number of their son's former students, having heard the news about the tree, returned to the school to collect signatures in order to save it. Many of them attended his funeral years ago, and both Bunkichi and Mitsuko were touched by how much they still care about their son even after all these years. Bunkichi will start to suspect that we had a hand in bringing them all back together, but even if we deny the claims, he'll just assume that we're being modest. The two of them are excited to see us visit once more as they have some more good news. One of the former students had visited earlier that day to show just how many signatures they had managed to collect, leaving them feeling proud about just how many lives their son touched. Wanting to deliver the good news directly to their son, Bunkichi invites us to walk with him to visit the tree, while Mitsuko stays behind to watch the store. After our visit to Gekkoukan, however, the two of them start writing a letter to the school, with Mitsuko feeling sorry for us and the students that signed the petition. When we arrive, the two of them will keep the contents of the letter a secret for the moment, although Mitsuko promises to tell us when the time is right. That said, they've grown rather fond of us and have begun looking forward to our frequent visits to the store, hoping we'll continue to visit in the future. During our final visit, we find Bunkichi sleeping behind the counter, mumbling in his dreams. He'll wake up as we approach, letting us know that his drowsiness is due to the relief he feels about their problems having been solved. He apologizes to us for the work that we put in to save the tree, but both he and Mitsuko sent in a letter telling the school that they should cut the persimmon tree down. After one of his visits to the tree, Bunkichi bumped into one of the students at Gekkoukan, who informed him the reason why the school was tearing the tree down was because they were planning on building more classrooms. It would be selfish for the two of them to hang on to the tree when it would be depriving students of new opportunities to learn, and seeing as their son was a teacher, they're sure this is what he would have wanted. For all of the kindness that we showed to the old couple, Bunkichi hands over a persimmon fruit, as it was the first one that the tree has ever grown. In all likelihood, it would also be the last one, but Bunkichi and Mitsuko agree that they should look towards the future with the time that they have left, rather than living in the past. With the fruit in hand, we're given the ability to fuse Koryu, a great golden dragon of Chinese mythology. While the story isn't without a few issues, I find it's one of the more memorable social links of the game. There are two main reasons for this, the first of which is Bunkichi and Mitsuko themselves, as they're a rather fun duo to watch. Bunkichi's forgetful and jovial attitude contrasts quite nicely with Mitsuko's more reserved and quiet demeanor, although the downside to this is that every scene with the two of them tends to lean towards Bunkichi. It almost feels like hanging out with your grandparents, and the small gifts they constantly provide don't hurt in Tartarus, but the primary reason why I enjoy the social link is the bittersweet story. Unlike what would be expected out of the Hierophant Arcana, the two aren't holding on to old dying traditions, but instead to the memory of their son. That said, the reasons for letting go align quite well to their arcana. By letting go of the tree, the two of them won't be holding back the school from offering new opportunities for the students to learn, and even if the tree is gone, their son will still remain in their memories and their hearts. It's a resolution they come to on their own, and a common complaint I've seen about the social link is that it doesn't really feel as though Makoto has much of an impact on the story. He's sort of just there to watch it all play out, and since the two of them are meant to be teachers of a sort as they represent the Hierophant, it could be that they're meant to teach Makoto by example. As they learn new information, they essentially come to their conclusions on their own, and the lesson they are meant to be passing on to Makoto and to us is that it isn't the material reminders of people that are important, but the impact they left on our lives. Their son was so admired by his students that they came to his funeral and petitioned to save his tree, and the knowledge of just how loved their son was likely means more to the elderly couple than any tree. If anything, the new classrooms built over that area will carry on their son's legacy, and is, in all likelihood, what he would have preferred. It's a lesson that permeates throughout the game, that the most precious thing we can give to another person is our time, and that the impact we leave on other people will define who we are when we're gone. There are certainly other social links that better explore this theme, and others where Makoto serves as a passive observer than an active participant. But for what it's worth, I still like to spend time with Bunkichi and Mitsuko whenever I replay this game. The lesson of learning to let go is also embodied in the Hanged Man Arcana, which serves as a symbol of patience and sacrifice. This sacrifice may take many forms such as time or energy, but while in the upright position, the Hangman promises that it will yield greater benefits in the future. One needs only the patience to see those rewards and the willingness to take a step back and look at things from a new perspective. It is fitting then that the reversal of the hangman signifies a resistance to change, and that a person's indecision or stalling may lead towards stagnation. While walking to school one day, we can overhear some girls talking about a young girl that hangs out at Naganaki Shrine. From May 6th onwards, we can find the girl at the shrine, and if we try to talk to her, she'll ask us for something to eat and to drink. The takoyaki from the store at Iwatodai Station and a Mad Bull from the dorm vending machine happen to be her favorite snacks, and we can bring them to her and then leave her be for the moment, promising to hang out another time. When that later time comes, we play with the girl Maiko until the sun begins to set. Even then, Maiko doesn't want to head home just yet, as according to her, it's not a very fun place to be. Instead, feeling a bit of pity for her, we stay behind a little bit longer to keep her company, where she opens up about how her mother and father have been fighting quite a lot lately. Despite Maiko urging them to get along, the two of them seem to hate each other, and so it only seems natural that they hate Maiko as well. Going back to the shrine to visit her again, Maiko asks to head to Wild Duck Burger instead, grabbing some fast food to eat. It's one of the few times she's able to feel happy anymore, as her parents never fight when they go out to eat. Arguing wasn't something they used to do, and when Maiko asks why they would be thinking of getting a divorce, we can reassure her that sometimes people just drift apart. We can also, hilariously, tell her that it's her fault. The thought of her parents hating her enough to get a divorce causes Maiko to start sobbing in the restaurant, and when she finally calms down, she apologizes for how embarrassing she is when she cries. We can take Maiko for takoyaki the next time we hang out with her, where she'll laugh at an old memory of her father burning his mouth on some hot food. Unfortunately, her thoughts turn to the present, where her father doesn't spend much time at home anymore, which makes her start to worry. Her birthday is coming up soon, making her wonder whether or not her dad will show up for her. And while Maiko knows her mother will buy her presents regardless, it's a bit worrying her mother hasn't asked her yet what she wants. At this point, we're the only person that still plays with her. Thankfully, Maiko's concerns proved to have been in vain, as both of her parents remembered and shared a nice dinner together as a family. It's something they used to do every night, but has become a rare occurrence as of late due to the impending divorce. It stands to reason then that there's likely some issue between her parents that just hasn't been resolved, and if Maiko can solve it, then perhaps they'll call off the whole divorce, and go back to being a happy and loving family. Although she promised to ask her parents when she got home that night, we find Maiko in tears the next time we visit her. As it turns out, Maiko followed through with asking her dad why it was he and her mom were splitting up, and Maiko's father dismissed her, telling her that she was too young to understand. When Maiko kept pushing the issue, her father ended up hitting her. Rather than comforting her, her mother told her that it was her own fault she got hit for being so annoying, which only cements the idea in Maiko's head that her parents don't love her anymore. It's likely they wouldn't even care if she was there anymore, which sows the idea in her mind of running away and seeing if they come looking for her. The situation only gets worse as Maiko's parents have taken to yelling at her whenever she tries to intervene in their arguments, and unable to stand the fighting anymore, Maiko decides she's going to follow through with running away. Before she can leave home, however, she'll need to start packing up some supplies, like snacks and her health insurance card, and then it would just be a matter of choosing the right time to go. That time comes sooner rather than later, and so meeting up one last time at Naganaki Shrine, Maiko says her goodbyes to us. She'll miss us, but reminds us that we need to keep her plan a secret from her parents, running off into the city. It doesn't take long for a woman to come running up to us asking if we've seen a young girl in elementary school, and for a man to rush along behind her. Even now, the two of them can't stop arguing, the man blaming their daughter's disappearance on the woman's constant need to have her study, and the conversation only devolves into further shouting. The man stops to ask us if we are the high schooler that's been hanging out with Maiko when she should be practicing piano, which is news to the woman, and she understandably starts demanding an answer from us. After he calms the woman down, the man introduces the two of them as Maiko's parents, and they've been looking for her ever since they found a note informing them she was running away. Her father pleads with us to tell them where she is, or even where she might be, and against Maiko's wishes, we lead them to the takoyaki stand. As soon as we arrive, finding Maiko sitting all by herself, her mother rushes over to make sure her daughter is okay, before berating her for making the two of them worry so much. When Maiko starts sobbing, telling her parents she didn't want them to get a divorce because of her, the two of them finally calm down and start to see how their actions have affected their daughter. Maiko thanks us for helping her see that her parents still care for her, and the three head back home to have a very long talk. Even after all that, Maiko's parents still allow her to hang out at the shrine where we continue to play with her, until she starts to feel hungry and asks to go grab a bite to eat. When we sit down at Wild Duck Burger, Maiko talks about the conversation her parents had with her about why they're getting divorced. They had tried to explain that while they no longer love each other, they both still loved her a lot. Even if Maiko doesn't want them to go through with the divorce, her parents are going ahead with it, which means Maiko will be forced to choose whether she wants to stay with her father or leave with her mother. On one hand, her father buys her all sorts of toys and snacks, but on the other, Maiko's mother has been crying a lot lately, and she's not sure her mother can handle being alone. What makes the decision even harder is that it's all too likely her mother will be moving somewhere far away, where Maiko won't be able to play with us anymore. The next time we hang out, we take Maiko to get some takoyaki, where she tells us that she's made her decision. She will be moving with her mother out of their house so that she can help with the cooking and cleaning whenever her mother goes off to work. Since her dad is so capable, he should be fine on his own, but it means she won't be seeing him or us for much longer. On the day of the big move, Maiko visits the shrine to play with us one last time, spending hours to make the most of our final encounter. Now that she's played with us enough to make sure we never forget her, Maiko tells us that we'll still be friends even if we're far apart, just like how her and her father will still be family. If anything, this experience has shown Maiko just how important family is, and she vows to come back when she's all grown up and marry us so that she can make a family of her own. To keep us connected even when we're far apart, Maiko hands us a bead ring to hang on to, and after giving us a kiss on the cheek, she heads back home to leave with her mother. As she does, we are left with the ability to fuse the Phrygian god Attis, consort to the mother goddess. Perhaps the best place to start analyzing Maiko's social link is with its arcana, the Hanged Man. It's not an arcana that Maiko fully devotes herself to seeing upright, keeping it reversed all the way to the end, but her acceptance of the situation does point towards her eventually moving forward. Maiko does, however, start to embrace the change by choosing to leave with her mother, even if it means leaving behind her house, her friends, and her life with her father. It's understandable given the character and the situation, and so it's a story that I think fits the themes of the Hanged Man particularly well. Despite the fact that change is happening around her and her parents are set on getting a divorce, Maiko is resistant to the change and spends much of her time either reminiscing about when they were all a happy family or trying to think of ways to bring her parents back together. Divorce is hard on any child, especially one so young, and so it's natural Maiko would try to find a way to fix her parents' marriage. As she is seeing the situation through the eyes of one caught in the middle, however, she isn't taking into consideration the perspectives of the two opposing sides, and instead focusing on how the situation affects her. Counter to the hangman's warnings to slow down and think the situation over clearly, Maiko's failures result in her taking drastic action by running away from home. While it did help prove to her that her parents still cared for her, it was ultimately a reckless idea that could have led to her getting herself hurt, and instilled a lot of fear and anxiety in her mother and father over where she could have gone. Other than the fact that we are playing as a high schooler hanging out with a random girl in elementary school, this is my biggest problem with the social link. In order to advance forward, we need to encourage Maiko to run away from home, even telling her at one point she won't be needing anything important like food or identification cards. It doesn't exactly paint Makoto in the best light, although it could be chalked up to his more uncaring outlook on life. Overall, I don't dislike Maiko's social link, but I'm also not overly fond of it. I do, however, like the story's concept and how it ties to its arcana. Children are some of the most vulnerable members in society when it comes to drastic changes in their lives, whether it be something as serious as going through a divorce or dealing with the death of a loved one, or something more mundane such as moving to a new city. It's for this reason that the Hanged Man presents such an important lesson to especially younger people, as at some point we all need to learn to accept that which we cannot change, and that sometimes it is simply better for us to take a step back and weather the storm. Whether we like the outcome or not is irrelevant, as what truly matters is that we made it through to the other side, and that the experience has left us a little wiser for the future. Heading up the second half of Yabasha, August has brought in 2 new party members for us to play with, along with a few more opportunities to look at their personas. In fact, these will be the last 2 personas that we will be looking at from new members, and of the 2, Koromaru's persona is the most obvious in the story that it is trying to tell. The great beast Cerberus was known as the multi-headed hound that guarded the underworld, preventing the dead from leaving and the living from wandering in. It was one of the many children of Echidna and Typhon, who sired many other famous monsters such as Orthrus, the Lernaean Hydra, the Sphinx, and the Nemenian Lion. Known also as the Hound of Hades, descriptions of Cerberus have varied over the years, with the original concept incorporating more aspects of snakes and serpents, although the most iconic design is simply of a large dog with 3 heads. What breed of dog depicted varies depending on the interpretation, but most often, Cerberus is shown to be bulky and intimidating. Persona 3, however, takes the idea in a different direction, with the design of the persona looking much more sleek and agile, better suited to hunting and chasing down shadows rather than attacking them with brute force. The design is rather akin to a Doberman, a breed that fits well with the concept of Cerberus, as Dobermans were originally bred to be used as guard dogs in late 1800s Germany. While there are quite a number of different dogs across mythology to pick from, the reason why Cerberus was chosen should be fairly obvious, as Koromaru is the guard dog of the Naganaki Shrine, protecting it from any shadows that attempt to enter that sacred place. In fact, Koromaru is so loyal to protecting his own personal version of Hades that he still guards it long after his master has passed away. It's a rather straightforward persona, but it's not the only famous dog that shaped Koromaru as a character, as I would say an even more important inspiration was a dog named Hachiko. Hachiko was a famous dog from 1920s Japan, once owned by Hidesaburo Ueno, a professor at the Tokyo Imperial University. Every day, Hachiko would make the walk to meet with Ueno at Shibuya Station and accompany his owner along the last stretch of his daily commute. In May of 1925, however, Ueno would pass away while at work of an aneurysm, and Hachiko would be left waiting at the station for someone that would never be coming home again. And yet, Hachiko would make the trip every day from the house where he lived to Shibuya Station, and would continue to do so for the 10 years following Ueno's death, until Hachiko passed away due to a combination of heartworms and old age. Hachiko's spirit lives on through Koromaru, not only for the daily walks both dogs took even after the deaths of their owners, but also the sheer dedication and loyalty both of them possessed. Hachiko remained loyal to Ueno and walked his master's spirit back home every day, while Koromaru protects what was once the home of the Shinto monk that took care of him, eventually turning towards joining Seas in order to forever end the threat of the Dark Hour and avenge his fallen friend. With such a clear-cut idea on how a persona is tied to its user, it only seems appropriate that the last one to cover is the hardest of the game to analyze, or at least for the moment. Ken's persona is the goddess of retribution, Nemesis, who was once said to deliver divine justice to those that rose up against the gods. It all seems a little out of place for a child, but as we take a bit of a peek under the surface, Ken shares a couple of parallels with Nemesis. One parallel is through Ken's parents, as while we are told of his mother, we never get any word as to his father. Similarly, the mother of Nemesis was said to be Nyx, the incarnation of night, but her father was a bit more speculative. Some myths say that her father was either Zeus, the king of the gods, Oceanus, the titan that commanded the rivers surrounding the world, Erebus, the personification of darkness, or that Nemesis spawned straight from Nyx without any sort of father involved. The primary connection to Nemesis, however, is Ken's reasons for wanting to join the team, and that is to serve as an avenging angel. While his mother's death was ruled as an accident, Ken had always believed that there was more to the truth, and as he slowly becomes accustomed to the Dark Hour, it becomes increasingly clear that it and the Shadows were somehow involved. With Shadows being the manifestations of humanity's darkest thoughts and desires, Ken would tear them down in the same way that Nemesis brings justice against the wicked, or those whose fortune swings too wildly in their favor. This wickedness may take many forms, such as the case of Echo and Narcissus. So taken by his own vanity, Narcissus spurned the love of others, but it would be Echo that proved to be his downfall. Rejected by the object of her desires, Echo would wither away into a voice that mimicked others. And to pay for his arrogance and his pride, Nemesis would lure Narcissus to a pool of water, where his own beauty enchanted him. For a man so devoted to himself, it would be a fitting punishment for him to spend his days gazing into his own reflection until death came to claim him. The primary crime that Nemesis was dispatched to punish was that of hubris, which in the context of the Greeks meant one that openly defied the gods. It's a very broad action with many examples, including those like serving as a false prophet or offering human flesh as sacrifice, but I can think of no better example of hubris than mankind creating a monument to the heavens. Such was the case of the Tower of Babel of biblical myth, where mankind created a tower to enter heaven, only for the tower to be torn down by a wrathful and vengeful god. Here, the hubris that Ken would be punishing is that of the Corridor group, as it was their attempts to seize a power beyond their control that would birth Tartarus as a symbol of their arrogance. It would need to be torn down just as Babel was, and perhaps then Ken will finally have avenged his poor mother. As a design, there isn't really a whole lot to say, as there is very little that connects back to Nemesis herself. Where Nemesis is classically depicted as being an angelic woman riding a chariot and carrying a set of scales, the persona has none of that. Instead, the body is defined by the large saw blade that wraps around it vertically, with the rest of the body sitting within. The dark color scheme may be a nod towards Nemesis' parentage being the personification of night, and possibly the personification of darkness, but to me, I think the design has a little less to do with the mythological Nemesis and more to do with Ken himself. The design, to me at least, almost feels like it could be some sort of action figure, with the stiff limbs that can be manipulated and rotated in their joints, and the saw blade being made to spin with the flick of a finger. Despite being forced to grow up due to the hardships he's had to face thus far, Ken is still just a child, and that's something he can't always hide. He often acts mature for his age, but can also show an interest in more childlike hobbies and toys, such as the Neo Featherman cartoon and action figures he and Makoto can talk about when chatting in the dorm. But with youth comes a more simple worldview in black and white, and a child's understanding of vengeance and retribution may not align with the grey moralities of life, which is a lesson Ken would unfortunately have to learn very soon. To those that have made it this far, thank you so much for the support. Over the last month and a half working on this video, there have been a few things that impacted it, such as moving houses, my new kitten breaking my old microphone, and the general busyness of the holiday season. All that said, however, I am proud of how this series is shaping up to be, and I'm looking forward to moving into the game's second half, which is where I believe the real meat of the story takes place. Before I can dive into the autumn, however, I'll be starting to alternate my uploads so that I can cover other games I love. While you wait for the next season of Persona 3, I will also be covering the story of God of War, starting with the original Greek saga. As such, I'm hoping to get autumn out around late March to sometime in April, depending on how things develop. If you're looking for more content, I've recently started streaming over the last month and will be trying to keep a consistent schedule of one stream per week. At the moment, I'm working on finishing Clair Obscur, and after that I have a few ideas on games that I could try out, such as Red Dead Redemption 2. Other than that, I have other games that I have covered, such as Dredge or the first 2 Dark Souls games for you to check out, which brings me back to a goal of mine. At the moment, I'm just over 50 subscribers away from my goal of reaching 600, and once I do, I will start working on my Bloodborne video, leaving me with quite a few irons in the fire. So if you like this kind of content, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave behind a comment, because I always love seeing what other people think of these amazing stories. All in all, it'll be a busy year ahead of me, but all in the effort to deliver more content than before and embrace a sort of new era for the channel. I'm looking forward to making more long-form content and would be ever grateful if you would stick alongside me and see what direction it is that we end up going. This has been Lore Master Zarek, and I look forward to seeing you all again very soon.